You're listening to Mark of the Maker. Hey everybody, I'm Mark Steiner and you're listening to Mark of the Maker. This is episode 85 of the show, and we have another interview for you. It'll be an interesting one this time. We always have fun guests, folks that we enjoy, and so this will be really cool. We'll get to that in a minute. We usually have a panel of knife makers here, some friends of mine. We have Mr. Tom Krein.
Hello, everyone.
We have Mr. Sean Kendrick.
Hey, hey.
And we have Mr. Michael Birch.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, very sophisticated.
That was my Tom.
Oh, yeah, you both of you guys, very classy. I like it. All right, so we have some fine folks on a website called Patreon, Patreon, that helps support the show. They send us a couple bucks every month to keep us moving, pay for microphones moving around the country, paying for equipment that we need. Sometimes the microphones break. We've had that happen a few times now. We need to replace them, and the Patreon supporters help enable all that to happen. So if you'd like to help support the show, you can go to patreon.com and search for Mark of the Maker, and we are in there. So thanks to all of our Patreon supporters. We really appreciate you, and that's how you can support the show if you like. The other thing we need to do is thank our friend George Palagonia at AMX Inc., American Metal Exchange. George is a seller of all kinds of cool knife-making materials, everything from titanium to zirc to damasteel. I'm not even going to try to read some of these damasteel names. That would be a challenge, wouldn't it, Birch?
Mm-hmm.
Gross Rosen. I don't know.
Close enough.
Like you said, George probably had to take a quiz to carry the stuff. He probably had to learn all those names, so we're going to have to get him at a show sometime and get him to pronounce some of these for us. But he also has Mokame and a bunch of Chad Nichols products too, like Mokutai, Kenobi tie, Chad's Damascus, and some other stuff. So if you need fancy knife materials or even just tie, George is your man. You can find him at amxinc.com. So, like I said, we have a good guest, someone we've known for a while, and I think in my case through USN, maybe the same for you guys as well. It's kind of how I met this person, and it's Mr. Jade Marsh. Jade, thanks for joining us on Mark of the Maker.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me.
Oh, he also went classy.
Was that classy enough?
It was. I like it.
I'm actually in a tuxedo right now, but I thought this was going to be on video, so I got a backdrop and a tied my own tie.
Yeah.
But I realized it wasn't, so I took my pants off. So
that's exactly what the other Marsh did when we interviewed Jeremy Marsh. He explained at the end of the show that he hadn't worn pants at all.
Perfect.
So thanks for coming on with us, man. We were very interested to talk through your history, and you have kind of a unique perspective on the scene, I think, and it'd be really cool to walk through it.
Well, thanks for that. First, I need to apologize because clearly this is your last episode because you guys are out of guests. So sorry that it only made it to episode 85, but it was a good run, guys. You did well, and I'm glad I can close it out.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
On a high note.
Yeah.
Yep.
Run it till the wheels fall off.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, hit me with a question. I don't know where to start.
Where to start? Yeah.
I find sometimes it's best to start at the end of the story and then go back to the beginning and then kind of sprinkle.
Yeah. We'll do all of that. So usually what we do is for people who don't know the guest, and that's true in many cases.
It's definitely true in this case. So
for people that don't know the guest, we try to kind of teach them who the person is. So let's talk basics, man. So let's talk first about, like you said, start at the end and go back. So explain to people what you do right now in the industry, and then we'll go back through the timeline from there.
Sure. So I am currently in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've been working for RMJ USA for just over the last year. The COVID thing tripped a bunch of people out. there was some mix-up in a lot of people's lives and mine as well, and my employment status changed for a bit. They found out I was available. I came out, and I took a trip out and talked to them. Actually, it was Brady Miller that forced me to come out, and I'm glad he did. So I came out, talked to them, and after a couple more trips and a little bit of convincing, I moved to Chattanooga. I actually drove across the country starting the 1st of April, I think, last year.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a bonsai run. And made it out and have been there. That's one of those things where I don't really care about titles, and I don't know if they have one other than head shop guy, but like, let's say production manager.
Okay.
In the shop. And we've got 3 companies, not counting Ryan's custom shop, the Gold Point Ford shop. So we have RMJ USA, we've got American Tomahawk, and we've got Chattanooga Leatherworks, all under one roof, all under one umbrella.
Awesome.
And there's various splits on the who runs what and partnerships and things like that, but we're all working together in the same facility.
Yeah.
And so I've been out here working on day-to-day stuff, working on changing a few things as far as adding a few elements to it, and maybe upping our show frequency a little bit, hitting a couple more shows and getting some of our stuff out there into more people's hands.
Yeah. Well, that's real cool. I would say probably at least a third. What do you think, Tom? About a third of our episodes make some reference to RMJ stuff.
Yeah, I think so. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think in Les as well, we'll call him Leslie. In Leslie's episode, he talked about Ryan a couple times.
Yes. So yeah, that's the RMJ is your current thing. You spent a bunch of years at Starling here, but let's go all the way back to teach people who Jade is. That's where we're going next. We're going the Wayback Machine. So
right,
where did you grow up, man?
Born in Kentucky, believe it or not.
Really?
And yeah, ended up in my dad took a job in California. By the time I was 5, we were in Pasadena, California.
Okay.
So really, I don't have much history other than from being out there. Spent all of my time in Pasadena, Glendora, Burbank, greater Los Angeles area, growing up out there. And that was 1975, which for the knife making industry and custom knives and things like that, that was a good area to be in that time. There's a lot of stuff that came out of that area that I was exposed to that I didn't realize until much later in life.
Yeah.
So yeah, grew up out there, but I spent summers and some Christmases at my mom's family house out in Michigan.
Okay.
Out St. Joe, Benton Harbor area.
Yeah, nice. It's beautiful.
And oh man, it was awesome. It was right on the lake, right on Lake Michigan, right at the south end. And that's where I learned about guns, about knives, fishing, hunting, all of that stuff. So my outdoorsiness comes from there, not from Pasadena,
from the Michigan
California.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Kentucky to Cali thing is big, right? Packed up the truck and they moved to Beverly.
Well, we went to Indiana first.
Okay.
For 2 years. My dad had jobs in radio, and then he got a job out in California. That's how we ended up out there.
Okay. So I think the 4 of us on the show, when we hear Burbank, Glendale, that kind of zone, it sounds like city to us. Was it a city kind of environment, neighborhood kind of environment?
Yeah, Pasadena was a city environment. Glendora was kind of a city environment. We had there was a time where we had a 5-acre kind of a mini ranch, which was kind of rare out there.
Yeah.
So I grew up with horses and animals and outdoorsy stuff, but yet still in a city. So it was kind of a weird combination.
Yeah.
But that, lent itself to bringing knives to school and things like that, which back then wasn't that frowned upon as much as it is now, but it was still a little city folk like, what is that? What's that clipped in your pocket? I've got a picture of, if you're into the religious scene, my dad was into Christian radio broadcasting. And that's
Okay.
and went to a private school. And I went to, if you know who Dr. James Dobson is, he was he's a personality in that community. Well, I went to school with his son, and I got a picture of the two of us launching water balloons at the quad in high school, and and clipped in my right pocket is a Spyderco clip. So even back then, I was carrying those things around.
Nice.
Good choice.
Was that a Micarta Calypso?
No, it was one of the stainless ones, because this this would have been 88.
Oh, early. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I'm old, man. I'm old. Yeah, it's I'll find the picture. I think I posted it up maybe years ago, but I'll try and revisit that one.
Yeah, very cool.
I'm gonna guess your age is right in the middle of all four of us.
I think
Sounds
so.
like it.
Yeah. I was born in 1970, so I'm not a mathologist, so I can't tell you how old I am, but I can tell you when I was born.
It's probably metric.
So I was wrong. You're actually a little older than I am, but yeah, I was born in 71. You are old. Sorry.
Yeah, I wasn't lying. People trip out. Up until recently, I didn't have so much gray hair, so it was a much harder guess. But
Damn, Tom's rubbing it in.
But you have so much hair, like all the hair.
I try to keep it going. But I don't know. Last year out here with the heat and humidity, it was a little rough, so I may make a wardrobe change and appearance change.
There you go.
But yeah, so did outdoorsy stuff in Michigan. Got my first Gerber bolstered lockback in 1975, and it was a Japanese-made Gerber. And I still have it somewhere, but I've moved a few times since then, so I'd have to dig it out. But that was my first knife. And my grandma taught me how to sew, and the first thing I did was make an ankle concealment rig for that folding lockback with elastic and crudely sewn Velcro, but it worked. It held. It was
nice.
Well,
Yeah,
so how'd you come across these like real brand knives at such an early age? Because I didn't know about them.
My uncle, my mom's brother, he was into that stuff. It was high quality guns, high quality knives, high quality gear. He was a higher end gear nerd himself in the 70s and 80s. And he had a really good friend that had one of those family corner gas station farm supply stores, and you see in the smaller towns.
Yeah.
I don't see them so much anymore, and that dude had everything. I'm pretty sure he was a coke dealer in the 70s and 80s, but man, he had all the good shit. So it was all good knives, all good guns, everything. So I was very fortunate to be exposed to high quality stuff at a very early age. And I think that might, that's formative years, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old.
Heck yeah.
So I think that kind of put me on that path for that. So
yeah, that's
where
pretty
that comes
awesome. We generally, our paths were wading through a little bit of junk before we got to taste some of the, a little bit better quality stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying I didn't get the junk, because my buddy and I in California, that when we were in California, that's all we could get was junk, because we didn't have access to somebody that had a nice store.
Right.
It was cheaply made throwing stars and horrible quality fixed blades and stuff like that. But when I'd go back to Michigan, I'd get the good stuff there.
Yeah, very cool.
So definitely spoiled. Definitely spoiled with that. But then again, being in Southern California growing up, you've got a bunch of makers grinding there, and that whole community there. There was a SoCal Blades Association. There was a Pasadena Knife Show. There was Jody Sampson was grinding down there for a while. There was a lot of stuff down there. Going to the Great Western Gun Show, which was in Pomona, California, one of the biggest gun shows in the country at the time. There was tons of guys there. And one of the guys that I met, his name is Wayne Watanabe. And not that, again, some of these are real regional names. You wouldn't necessarily know them across the country, but half his table was imitation knockoff colognes and perfumes, and the other half of his table was really cool Japanese wrapped, hand ground, hand finished knives, and he would take rat tail files, triangle grind them, and then quarter wrap the handle. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. I'm like, I'd never stabbed anything with it, but I just thought it was the coolest thing. It was the first handmade piece I ever bought, was that stabbing thing he made out of a file.
That's really cool.
But yeah, Wayne, if you go to the California show, you'll see him occasionally. He sets up still, but I think I talked to him right before Christmas. I'm still in contact with him, but his stuff was awesome. But you had, so then the 80s and early 90s, you've got guys like Phil Hartsfield out there.
Yeah.
He was down in Orange County, down in, I think it was Brea. You've got the Brea show. So there was a lot of opportunity if you could get around and if you knew where to go. And I was old for my class, so I was driving when I was a sophomore in high school. So I was driving around to the gun shows and checking that stuff out. I think I got my first Hartsfield knife I think it was like a year out. So I think I probably ordered it in 90 and got it in 91.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's real
But
cool.
that stuff, it was all out there.
Yeah.
That was, nobody wants to be out there now, but back then that was kind of the tail end of the highlights of manufacturing in Southern California.
Right. So all that interest in that stuff, it sounds like largely from your uncle, or maybe
100%.
exposure to it. Okay. So you got that interest developed in Michigan and then took that interest back to California, which, like you said, at the time was this wonderland of that stuff, right? Like different gun climate in California, different everything.
And then, we all end up finding like-minded people. So even in grade school, I found like-minded friends, and we'd even when I was in junior high school, we were having the 9mm versus 45 debate. Who does that in junior high school in Southern California? He liked 9mm, I like 45. It was, even back then in the early 80s, it was ridiculous. But that's the kind of people we were. We were doing stupid shit. I always say people don't grow up, they just get older. So I'm still doing the same shit I was doing when I was 11. I just have a much different bank account now.
Yeah.
But yeah, was, like you said, fortunate to be exposed to a lot of that stuff out there, and just kind of kept going with it and kept, seeking that stuff out. Still have the first Hartsfield knife that I got from Phil. So
did you see him at a show? Did you?
No, I read about him in one of the knife magazines, because I couldn't imagine growing up with the information so readily accessible that we have now. That you had to either wait for the magazine to come into the mail, or find a place that carried it and look and get that information. So I read about him, and I don't know if it was what knife magazine it would have been back then, but read about him. He had an ad with a phone number that I called. He mailed me a catalog. Still have the catalog. And that's how I got Ernie's catalog too. It was like a trifold Viper, back when it was Viper knives, before it was. I still have that catalog. It was a 4-page black and white folded thing that he sent in the mail. So you'd get a catalog in the mail. This is going to sound foreign to anybody younger than 40 and a half years old. You look at the catalog, and then you would call in and either order it or mail a check to them. Or I was able to drive down there. So it was, I could make it down. Him and Phil and his wife, Pat, they would run the store. They would only be open like 3 days a week or something like that. It wasn't, and then he'd be making knives the rest of the time. But yeah, so I found that, went down there, and then placed the order, filled out the order form, and placed the order for that knife with them.
What knife did you order?
It was a Kazuka. So it was a black underwrap, black overwrap. Most of his stuff was chisel ground Tontui, and it was like the mid-size. It was concealable enough to wear as a neck knife, but not the smaller version of the neck knife. And I actually wore that knife. I still have the worn out strap on it because I would wear it on patrol. I fast forward to becoming a cop in Southern California. I would wear it on patrol, and before I had a backup gun, I would wear it on my vest, but I would strap it, under your shirt, and strap it up with the Velcro strap so it would hang right in the right position. I still have the knife.
Yeah. So, you're a collector. That's the cool stuff. Still having the catalogs and the...
Oh, I still have... Yeah, I pulled it out actually the other night. It's still have that catalog, still have the Viper Knives catalog, have the custom crafted knives business card. You guys know? Ever heard of a guy named Alex Collins?
Uh-uh.
No, I
Okay.
don't think so.
So
Colin Collins.
custom
or not Colin
custom
Collins.
crafted knife, not Blackie Collins. No, custom crafted knives. KKK.
Oh boy.
This was a black dude who was grinding knives with Jody Sampson and those dudes in North Hollywood in the 70s and 80s up until the late 90s. I think he died in 99, 2000. This dude was a trip. Holy fuck. He had the best sense of humor about everything. Obviously, he's KKK knives on his fucking business card. This dude was awesome. Well, back when he was at shows and I was going, I couldn't afford one of his knives. He made the coolest shit. And for those of you that have a Google machine, Alex Collins, Alex, Collins with a C, you'll find, no, I shouldn't have said this because there's a knife I'm watching on eBay right now that I'm going to buy and somebody's going to go fucking snipe it.
You got
But
time.
he's got knives. There's some knives on eBay. There's some knives on Arizona Custom Knives. And they pop up every now and then. But he would make these asymmetrical grind. He would sometimes grind part of it with a file and then high polish and unique material handles. I don't think he ever made a sheath. All the sheaths that you see with these knives were not from him. Somebody else had to make them. But man, they were awesome. And that dude would make some cool stuff. So you see, in fact, Dwayne Dwyer made an AC knife years ago, and it's modeled after my micarta knife that I finally got from Alex before he died. And it's like a arrow spear pointy double-sided dagger, but it's asymmetrically ground. So it's hollow ground on the top left, and then you rotate it and it's hollow ground on the top left again.
Whoa.
And that creates the edges. It's awesome. So then Dwayne modeled his version of that off of my non-metallic knife, and that's where that model came from.
Check that out.
Yeah, we're going deep, kids. We're going deep. We're naming names. We're talking about years and dates. I know where the bodies are, and I still got the shovel from two of them. Same shovel, 2 for 1.
Like you said, I just pulled up, like you said, a very quick Google search, get you some crazy looking shit very fast.
Right? Look at that stuff, dude. That shit's fucking amazing. That dude was doing that stuff in the 70s. His son went on to become a cop in LA. He was such a good dude. Such a cool dude. And I trip out because I was talking to Doug's kid, Doug's new apprentice, attention to detail mercantile, Doug. His apprentice had this knife at the Texas show, and I'm like, dude, you got to look up Alex Collins because this, and he had no idea who he was. This kid's 24 years old. He doesn't know. But the same idea, nothing is new. Every now and then something's new, right? But the same energy is out there in the universe.
Yeah.
It just takes the right person to channel it and then put it into that medium and then put it out there on a table. And I got goosebumps when I saw this one that he did. I'm like, dude, that's an Alex Collins knife. I know you don't know who it is, but that's amazing. Because it bothers me when, I'm sorry I'm going on a rant right now. This probably wasn't what you guys expected.
No, it's all good.
From a guy that got famous for making silver beads in a shop. But anyways, it bothers me when people don't know that some of the stuff was out there. And
right.
I try, I talk to the guys in the shop now. Sometimes at lunch, I'll go in and we'll tell stories, and I'll ask them a question, and I'll say, well, look, this is where this came from. This came from that. I think it's so important that people know that some of these guys were out there. Yeah. And that they were doing cool shit. And it's okay to do it very similar. Right? It's okay to say, hey, I'm going to take that technique, I'm going to use it in new steel. I think he did all this stuff in like 440 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's okay to do that and keep going with it and keep those things going. I just think that's important.
Yeah. Looking at his Vorpalish type of dagger that he's done a few of, that's a sexy beast right there.
Oh, dude, there's one on eBay right now that I'll buy it because this isn't going to air tonight, so I'll be all right. But I'm gonna buy it because it's. And you look at that, he was doing weird, like mismatched materials on handles. I mean, it looked great, but he was like, one side's one color, one side's another. The dude was awesome.
Did you ever get to handle one of his split point knives?
Yeah, that's so he would take a file and file down the middle over the top to get that. like a fork tongue tip, right?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Wow.
I've got one of his little push daggers, one of those little 2-finger push. Oh, it's just cool stuff. File work on top. I mean, that guy must have worn out some files.
This is a dude that was clearly unafraid as a maker, right?
Unafraid.
Let
Oh
it
yeah.
rip.
He didn't give a shit. He was, and every single one was different. You could almost never get him to make the same thing.
Yeah.
Like if you'd say, "Hey, I want this," and be like, "Yeah, it's something totally different." And what are you gonna do? Say no? Hell, I mean, if you're dumb, you say no. I finally got to the point where I could afford one of his knives before he died, and I'm glad I got it.
Yeah. Well, exactly what you said about knowing about some of this stuff is exactly one of the reasons we want to do the show, right? It's one of the emphasis of the show is know that there's history, right? And yeah, you might do something really cool. And guess what? Somebody probably did this before, and it may actually be cool to go understand, right? that there's a ton of shit that happened that laid the groundwork for all of the stuff that this thing is built on today, right? And just kind of reminding people that that's there, because I think a lot of times what happens is, speaking of the rant thing, right? Our most popular episode is called "Get Off My Lawn," which was an entirely rant episode, and it was the most heavily downloaded episode by far. But a lot of, especially guys that are new to it, right, will come into this thing, they get real popular real fast, and don't have any appreciation for.
All right, here we go. Here's another story. So, Blade Show Portland, the one right before, so that would have been November 2019, right? Alicia Moot got the show out to Portland for 2 years.
Yep.
She asked me to help her with an event, so I put on they had a kitchen knife cutting competition. That wasn't at the show. It was like I think it was either Friday night or Saturday night. I don't remember. I was drunk. But anyways, I put that event on for her. I got the venue, got the bartender, got the all that stuff, set it up. And so a few of us a couple of guys that helped me do that. Josh, not from Strider, but Josh from Oregon Rifle Works. Him and his crew came and helped me work the door and all that. So we're sitting at a bar up the street, we're drinking, we're sitting around a fire pit, and this kid he's probably 24 years old, and he's a knife maker up in the Portland area. And there's another dude there that worked for Benchmade. I don't remember his name, and I wouldn't say it anyways. But anyway, so this new knife maker kid and this guy from Benchmade, and the knife maker kid's got his folder out. I'm like, oh, that's a cool folder, man. That's a good incorporation of the Walker liner lock. And he goes, the what?
Right.
And I was a smoker at the time, and I threw my fucking cigarette in the fire, and I look at this kid, and I go, do you fucking know who that is? And he's like, no. And then I look at the Benchmade guy. I go, you better know, or I'm going to throw something at you. And he goes, and I threw my drink at him before he could even answer. And it was a plastic cup because it was outdoors. Listen, I didn't throw a full drink. I drank it first, and then
of course.
Let's not.
Nobody wastes a full drink.
But these kids didn't know. They didn't know. And I'm like, all right, clock in, because we're going on 12 minutes of this lecture.
It's kind of sad.
It's sad, dude. It's so, and this guy is thinking, he's Instagram famous, right? He doesn't have any background. He doesn't have any history. He doesn't have any found. Now, to his credit, he stepped his game up. He paid attention. He learned some things. So I'm not talking. Sometimes people don't have a mentor or somebody to grab their arm and say, hey, let's pay attention to this. But so anyways, I went off on that. But sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to cut you off. But
no, it's all good. I think it's different times, right? You mentioned it about the printed catalogs. We've talked about that a few times in past episodes, where it's like,
oh yeah,
send a self-addressed stamped envelope to this address.
SASE, self-addressed stamped envelope. What does that acronym mean? Self-addressed stamped envelope. Oh, okay. What's a SASE? I don't know.
Right. But that's how you got stuff done, right? And
that's how you got it.
It's so foreign to people today, which is fine, right? It's not old man grumpiness. I love the tech of today. It's just different. And unfortunately, there's not a ton of, there really is a lot of background on the internet, right? People can go learn this stuff on the internet easily, but.
Sure, but you got to know to look for it.
Yeah. And you
got to know to go for it.
Read words and shit like that sometimes. So
I can remember, speaking about the SASE, right? I can remember getting Blade magazine as a teenager, like and actually sending them off to everyone that had a catalog. I would just send it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I learned stuff, see what they've got. You couldn't go on the website and see it because there was no internet.
Right.
Yeah.
Different times.
That was
different times.
And I'm so glad I saved a couple of those catalogs too, because
Oh yeah.
those days are gone and those people are gone. The Hartsfields,
Sadly,
God rest their souls, they're gone. But yeah, I still got a little bit of it. I'll have to put some pictures up of some of this stuff because it's I like it, but I guess we all sometimes we just get frozen in time wherever that is for us, for our era or whatever. And I'm not saying I don't use the what did Les call it, socialist media. I love that guy. You guys were talking about, he was talking about his FM1 and I have 3 of those. I have one all titanium, orange peel, hollow ground. I probably bought it in like 2006, 2007. Yeah, still have it, still carry it. That guy, he used to make good folders. He doesn't anymore. Now he just pushes buttons and then holds the bag out and it falls into the bag.
Exactly. Collects the money at the end. That's all.
God bless him for it. Well, those of us that have girls' names as a first name, we have to stick together. So I'm used to that one.
Yep. All right.
But yeah,
so
there's my rant.
Yeah. So, all right. So where are we on the timeline? You were doing the SoCal Knife Show thing, which is really, really cool experience.
Oh yeah, going to those. Going to Dan Delavan show from Plaza Cutlery. He was having that show way back in the day.
Yeah.
Brea Knife Show, and then I made a career choice, and I got into law enforcement in Southern California, and worked.
What drove that call? But I'm sorry to interrupt, but how did you end up on that path?
I didn't like school. I went to Cal Poly Pomona, and I was in their agricultural business management program, and it sucked. But I grew up around horses and animals and stuff like that, and I knew a bunch of people that were there, so I kind of got backdoored into the program. But I'm like, yeah, this sucks. So I got out of that. I went to community college, took some cop classes like administrative justice and basic legal and stuff like that. Got mentored by a guy who was a lieutenant at a local department, and he said, hey, you should go. You're pretty good at that. Those are the only classes I was acing because they made sense. They were logical and made sense. He goes, you should come on a ride along. I want to ride along. And he's like, you should go to the academy. But back then, the mid 90s, I didn't have prior military. I didn't have any language other than basic Spanish, and I didn't have any really other extra credit. So it was tough to get on. So the way around that was to put yourself through what was called pre-service. So you would pay to put yourself through the Sheriff's Academy.
Oh, wow.
Buy your own books, buy your own uniforms, and attend just like everybody else. You do the same thing, but you paid for it. You're not sponsored, in hopes that in the time it takes you to graduate, someone comes and hires you.
Oh, wow.
So for me, that took until the day before graduation to get hired. I was like, ooh, this might not work out. This might have been a bad move. But it worked out well for a minute. So that was, but I had an advantage on parts of it because I grew up shooting, not in Southern California, but I grew up, I was going to Michigan every once a year, every other year, and even in the 90s, most of those people that went through that academy didn't know how to shoot a handgun.
Really?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy.
That's good to know.
Yeah, we were all about the guns in Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. But I couldn't afford. So if you put yourself through, you had to bring your own gun and bring your own ammo.
Oh, yeah.
But if you can't afford that, they would give you a 60, I think it was a 66. Okay. Come on, Tom, help me out. Stainless steel, 4-inch barrel, adjustable sight, 357. It's 66, 65s. I get those mixed up. I have several, but I get them mixed up. Anyways, they would loan you the leather rig, and provide the 38 special ammo for free. So I'm like, well, that's the only way I could afford to do this. So I did that. I didn't know how to shoot a revolver back then. I had no clue. So I took that thing home, dry fired the shit out of it, with the leather they gave me, and then ended up graduating Top Gun with that because nobody else there knew how to shoot.
Yeah.
Was it the Combat Magnum or the? I think.
Yeah, it was the whatever the stainless steel 4-inch barrel 357 Magnum was, and I think
that's a 66. I think.
Okay, yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah, it was that stainless steel gun. So I had a leg up that way. I knew how to pull the trigger a little bit. So that was cool. So I ended up working for a department in San Bernardino County, like a mid-sized city out there. We had like 115, 120 sworn cops.
Wow.
And worked that. They hired me the day before graduation. I said, hey, come down to the station, get your patches, get your badge, go get your uniform sewed up, and then that way you can graduate with patches on your sleeves. And I'm like, cool. Where's the city? I had no idea. I didn't know where the city was. I literally didn't, because I didn't spend any time in San Bernardino County. I was all Los Angeles County and then Orange County. So that happened, got that gig, and because of the shooting thing, I ended up getting some opportunities, getting on the shooting instructor team and doing some stuff like that.
Nice.
But like-minded people find like-minded people. So there's a guy that not many people know, but he goes by initials DB. And DB, I'm kidding, everybody knows this fucking guy. So Daryl Bulkey was a cop in Ontario, and I'm not speaking out of school. This is not something he's private about. He's very outspoken, posts pictures of it up. But he had a cop shop supply store, Ontario Police Equipment. It was very original with the name.
Yeah.
It was in the city of Ontario, and they sold police equipment. So very creative, Daryl. Good job.
It's very, very catchy, very clever.
Right. So I went there, started getting stuff, met him, and he was way connected. That's how I met the guys at Strider. He's like, hey, you got to meet these guys. That's how I met Willis over at SOE. He's like, you got to meet this guy. You got to get this gear. You got to get this knife. And I'm like, okay, cool. I was single, no kids, the best paying job I'd ever seen. And I'm like, yeah, I'll buy all that gear. What else? How many should I buy?
And you were preconditioned as a gear geek, right?
Yeah,
you were
absolutely.
Like primed.
I'm like, okay, I can recognize what quality feels like.
Right.
I can recognize what quality kind of looks like. You know, there's variations in that, and that all those things fell into place. So I'm like, yeah, I'll get some of that stuff.
And now you got a paycheck.
Right. I had a paycheck. I had so to afford to go through there, I had to sell my Jeep, and my neighbor was a used car dealer. So he goes, I said, listen, I need $3,500 and I need a car that's going to work for a year. And I have my Jeep. He goes, no problem. I got you. He gave me $3,500 and he gave me a 1984 two-door Nissan Sentra. This is 1994. Just so we're clear on the timeline.
What color was it?
It was blue. Two-door.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. And he said, I guarantee everything, wheel to ceiling, every engine, bumper to bumper, everything, I guarantee it. And I only had one tire fail and he fixed it and he was good to go. So like even before I got off probation, I had a new car because I couldn't keep driving that thing.
Today it's weird because today a 10-year-old car is still a $10,000 car, right? In those days, a 10-year-old car was like a sketchy last legs $500 car. Or not
it was
not great.
Maybe $600 car, maybe. It was bad.
In college, my buddy had that exact car, I think, and it was crazy.
And the car lived for another couple of years after that. It kept going. So, so met Daryl, got, and that's how I got into Strider knives. That's how I got into Emerson, and got connected with those guys. And I had an Emerson catalog. I had that mailer, that Viper Knives fold out mailer.
Yeah.
Before, and then I met him, and fortunately I was able to convince Mary that I really needed a CQC5, and she's like, all right, come down to the shop and pick one up.
Nice.
Ooh.
Which I still have that knife.
That's awesome.
And still have the knife, the Strider fixed blade Tonto that I carried on duty, and another, I think it was an HT and an SA that I carried in my pocket.
Wow. You were decked out for a cop in that era.
Well, unlike the rest of the cops that were on their third marriage, had a jet ski payment, had a summer, I didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
I lived I'm not saying I was smart. Maybe I should have had a jet ski and a second wife, but I didn't. So, I just bought cool gear, and it worked out. It worked out.
Jade, do you think that, like, you've made that statement a bunch of times, and it's very, I see and find the same thing. Like-minded people find like-minded people. Do you think that's part of what got you into the cop thing originally? There's a lot of cops that are knife, gun, whatever guys, right? There's
but they're more so now. Back then, they weren't quite as into it. Nobody was into it like Daryl was.
Yeah. Okay.
At least back then. At least not that I saw. Not in the 90s. There was a few, but I mean, this guy created a business just so he could get stuff at wholesale and wear it. I'll become an Eagle dealer so I can get cool Eagle gear. And he posted up a picture a while back, and I actually found mine because we both have our Eagle fanny packs that we would carry our Glock 26s in.
Nice.
Back in the day. But yeah, I to some extent. But yes, to prove your point, we had a captain who was an HK dealer.
Oh, wow.
So our department had Benelli shotguns. Our department had MP5. It was crazy because he would sell them to the department.
Right.
Now, not that he was trying to rip them off. They were all good guns. It's not like he was. I'm not gonna blaspheme another name, but I'm not gonna say Keltec. So it's not like he was hustling used shit. It was all good quality stuff.
Right.
But he immediately found me. And he'd call when I had a desk job for a while, I had one of our special units, and he'd call my extension. He goes, "Hey, meet me in the range." And he had this Ruger Mark, I guess it would have been a Mark II pistol, right? The 22 pistol with an integral suppressor with a twist lock on the bolt so it wouldn't eject the casing. So it was as quiet as you could possibly be. So we're downstairs in the basement of we had a lot of departments back then had underground ranges, like in the basement of their stations.
Yeah.
No ear pro, no nothing. Twist that bolt, lock it, fire around. It was awesome.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, he was a gun nerd. I was a gun nerd, so
that's awesome.
That's a legit hush puppy.
Dude, it was it was the legit, like, that's the only one I've ever seen that had the twist lock on the bolt. It was, you could thumb the bolt and hold it closed, but this one had an actual, it was like a round disc on the back end of the charging handle, rotated a quarter turn, and it locked it in place.
Huh.
And no action.
Never got to use it, but it was cool.
That's super cool. I was at a USN get together one time, and they had it was like a little kid's bolt action 22, like a cricket or whatever, with a suppressor. And I'm like, I don't get it. What's the big deal? And then
you shot it.
And then you fire it, and it's like,
back gas.
Holy fuck.
Yeah, because the bolt, nothing's opening the bolt, so the gas is all going through the can.
Exactly.
One of my favorites to shoot is the bolt action 22 with the silencer. It is just dummy quiet.
It's a joy. Yeah.
Yep. It's awesome. Yeah. So I guess that's how I met Mick and Dwayne and those guys, and Daryl, and yeah, was very fortunate that way. Again, right place at the right time, right era.
Yeah.
Right geographic location. Maybe the right mindset. I don't know if I was in the right mindset, but I was definitely in a mindset that attracted me to that kind of stuff. And it was good. It was fun.
And it's still in the early-ish times for a bunch of those brands too, right? For those makers and the stuff.
Well, for those guys, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
relatively speaking.
Ernie had just gone from, I was going to use the word transition, but that's not appropriate. He had just gone from Viper knives to, I forget what he was calling Emerson knives, but yeah, so that was a transitional period for his company. Mick and Dwayne were newer to the scene, and if you ever mentioned a folder to them, they'd laugh because they weren't going to make a folder. All they made were giant, fixed blades and not chisel ground, but tontos and big heavy stuff, cord wrapped, and that a folder was a furthest thing from their mind.
That's real cool. It's like you said, right place, right time.
It was just right place, right time, and I had my eyes open to that, because not everybody sees different things when you're looking. I noticed that stuff, and I would see that stuff, and then they would set up. They would go to that Pomona Gun Show.
Okay.
Willis would set up an SOE table, and Strider would set up, and then there was a guy named Mike Resignio, and he had he did bolt guns and stuff like that. And there was they would all set up together sometimes, like 3 tables in a row, and Mike was building bolt guns for a lot of the local departments, a lot of the local SWAT snipers and stuff like that. So of course I had to get one of those, and
Right.
may or may not have been on the cover of SWAT magazine at one time.
Oh,
But different life. Yeah, with his gun. It's because they were doing an article on his guns, and I had the best hair. So I know Tom is surprised by that, but
Nothing changes.
so that's how that worked out.
wow.
Now we had this level of celebrity here.
Yeah, I should have introduced you as SWAT
No, you
magazine
should not.
cover model.
Again, it was just I took that magazine to my lieutenant. I'm like, hey, lieutenant, here we should, here's a magazine. We should keep it for the team. And he threw it out of the office because he thought it was one of those fake ones that you get at Disneyland where you like pose in front of like Sports
cowboy
Illustrated
clothes
or something, or yeah. Or they make you a fake model at Sports Illustrated or something. I'm like, no, it's actually real. But anyways.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So, okay. So while in the academy, this is a good story. Because I was pre-service, I had to pay attention and do well. And there was another guy whose name was Charles. He was also pre-service, and we ended up, again, like-minded people find like-minded people. We ended up befriending each other the first week of the 20-week academy. And we sat next to each other every single day for that whole academy. You had to move seats, like front row, side row, whatever. But we, and then that guy ended up going on to starting the clothing company Tap Out.
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
he was, and then I actually physically hand screened the first shirt for him because he didn't want to do shirts. And I had a side business where I was making some silk screen shirts because a buddy of mine had a press. And so I'm like, yeah, he's like, hey, screen some shirts. I go, I don't want to screen your shirts, man. I don't want to. He goes, just screen some shirts. I'm like, nah. This is years after we graduated. And so I find, I go, all right. So I hooked him up with my buddy who had the 6. He had a 6-color hand press. So you got this big, plastic squeegee, and you squeegee the screen and rotate the next color. And so I screened those.
Wow.
So I did that for him for a little bit. Yeah, he was a character. And then after I got out of police work, I went and did some stuff with him for a couple of years when the company was starting to grow a little bit. But
Check that out.
The dude made some money and created a whole line of a different type of dude.
yeah, he created. Well, see, then in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, if you had a Tap Out shirt, you trained, because we only sold those things at the YMCA that was having a jiu-jitsu tournament or an underground fight or stuff like that. 2002, 2003, they were turning up in Walmarts and it was a whole different.
Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah, everywhere. But it was, it definitely evolved into something else.
Yeah. Wow.
It was a big deal.
Oh yeah, it was a big deal. It was fun for a while.
So you're doing the police thing, and then things changed, right? What was that timeline like?
Yeah, so I got out of that, not by choice, but I got out of it. I won't tell the story because it's long and I have to drink for that, and I don't really drink anymore.
We'll do that at a show.
We'll do that at a show. I'll tell that story at a show with no mics. But when you change departments in Southern California, you go through another at-will probationary period. So you go through another. So if you get an lateral, there was some turnover, and a bunch of us left that department, went to a different department. We all went to different departments because the politics and stuff like that. And I wanted to go to a nicer city, make a little bit more money. Thought it was going to be a little bit more mellow, but it was not. It was more mellow on the outside. It was less. It was a little more hectic on the internal politics side of it. So started a new probationary period, and you go for a year, and if you make that year probation, then it's very difficult to get fired. Real easy before, really difficult if you make that period. So I worked
Right.
364 days, 18 and a half hours, and was let go. So I almost made it. I was so close. But, doors closed, windows open, that kind of stuff it was really awesome. It worked out. It didn't work out so well for a while, but worked out good for my bartender for about 6 months. So that happened. I got out of that and started working for a buddy of mine doing some machining stuff. Learned how to run a water jet. We had a flow in 2001, 2002. We had the biggest flow water jet that they made.
Wow.
It was massive.
Making industrial stuff, or what kind of stuff were you making?
He was making paintball guns.
Really?
Yeah, and it was a company we were out of Pomona, California, and it was called On Target Products. And Brian, I should give him a call. I haven't talked to him in a while. He was machining them and water jetting parts and all of that. And he's like, "Hey man, why don't you just come hang out and work with me for a while?" So I did that. And we made paintball guns, paintball parts, but then I kept the water jet running when it didn't need parts. So we do like tile and marble cutouts and big tables and stuff like that. That was the easy part, was cutting that stuff out because it was big and easy to cut, and it wasn't. You had the small parts, that's where you lose them into the tank, or they fly up and hit your jewel and break your nozzle and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did that for a little bit. Got heavy into the Harley motorcycle scene for a while. And met this guy that was doing some silver jewelry at one of the biker events. He had a store in Santa Monica. It was a company called King Baby.
Yeah.
And I met Mitch, the guy at that time. He was the only one. He got an investor later and grew the company considerably. And it's quite a big brand now. But so I started doing some water jet parts for him. He needed some stuff made. So I water jetted like his showcases with his logo in them and traded out because I'm like, oh, I want this cool jewelry and I can't afford it because it was expensive and I didn't have quite the paycheck that I used to. So I did that, started hanging out with him a little bit, doing some silver work in his shop, and I found it really interesting. And he needed some big stuff made. He was opening a store in Japan, in Nagoya. I cut the big entryway sign for that. We created it, shipped it over there, and then I actually went with him over there and set it into the floor and opened the store. It was kind of cool. It was a cool experience.
That is cool. Is that the first time you went to Japan?
That is the first time I went to Japan, 2003, right when SARS broke out.
Oh boy.
Which there was no Instagram and very little internet, and we didn't have smartphones with news alerts. I didn't know shit about SARS.
Right.
Or wait, was it SARS or is SARS different from bird flu? Anyways,
yeah,
the one big one that was breaking out in Asia. I get off the plane, everybody's wearing masks. I'm like, what the? Yeah, that was, so I'm like, well, but again, didn't turn out to be a big deal. But it was a cool experience. Yeah, going out there doing that with him. Came back.
First trip to Asia is a crazy thing. At least it was for me.
Oh yeah, it was
It's nuts. Like you talk culture shock. Like, what the fuck is going on around me? Where am I? What is that? Is that person eating that? Like,
is that
just
food?
A wild experience? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good game. Food or trash. And that's not. I'm not trying to be insulting to.
Yeah.
It's just different. We eat different shit. And if you get out, once you get outside of the main transportation hubs, it's a whole different scene. But it was awesome going over there. It was a great experience.
Very cool.
Got out of that, and that's when I ended up working for Rick over at Starling Gear. Was shortly after that, and that would have been end of 03, end of 03 was that.
Okay, and that you went into that with Starling Gear with having had some silver experience or just being around it?
So yeah, some. I barely knew how to solder. I knew how to polish and do some of that stuff. I just liked the stuff. I thought it was cool. And I didn't know, it's one of those things where if you don't know all the backstories, you just see the the piece at face value, and oh, that's a cool piece. And then you start learning some backstories, like, I don't really want to be around this. And you go to a different scene, and that's where I started working for Rick, and that was great. That was fun.
Yeah.
That was end of 2003.
Wow.
And then then in 2004, I was training with a guy. I lived out in Glendora at the time, and I feel so bad. I've been trying to think of this guy's name for 2 days, and I should have texted Jerome, but I didn't. So we were training Kempo Karambit. So there was a guy who was a Kempo karate guy, but he was big into the Karambit knife. And I thought that was cool as shit. Because I had one of the Emerson Karambits. I thought, the folding one. And you guys know where that started? Where the Karambit craze really started in America?
No.
Okay. So October of 2001.
I'm buckling my seatbelt.
Hold on. This guy that nobody really knows, but he's got the initials DB, puts together a training seminar at Prado shooting range. And this is very funny because this guy just posted up on Facebook pictures from it. So Josh, if you guys know me, if I wasn't a grown man, I would have a best friend, and his best friend, and that name would be Josh Lee. Yeah. Josh Lee puts a picture of us, timeline picture up on Facebook, right? So this guy named Ryan posts up, I haven't seen Jade since Daryl's seminar. And I'm like, dude, if you have pics, show me. And he posted them up today, and there's 2 pictures of that seminar. And they're all, nobody had smartphones. They're all probably real camera photos from a disposable Kodak or something. Because they're blurry, they don't look good, but you can tell who's who in the pictures. So Daryl puts together this 2-day training seminar at Prado Dam Shooting Range, which was where they had the Olympics in '84 for shooting. And this was a who's who of Daryl could get out of his Rolodex. This is both, the whole Strider company was there. This is before Josh worked for Strider. He was still working with Tag Gear. But Mick and Dwayne were there. Ernie Emerson was there. Bram, is it Frank? Makes that folding knife that, anyways, I never got into it. One of the Dog brothers was there.
Bram's knife has the hump on the back.
Yeah, and you can like strike with it, and Bram Frank. Yeah.
Break open. Yeah.
Right. I never got that. That was always seemed a little gimmicky to me, but anyways, he was there. That one of the Dog brothers was there. And if you don't know who that is, if you're listening to this, you don't know who the Dog brothers are, Google that and watch some videos. If you're not, we should have opened this with, if you're not taking notes, you should be taking notes. Write this shit down, kids.
Right.
There's probably one kid that listens to this. Everybody else is 65 years old. And they're
exactly.
Like, shut this guy up.
Right. Nobody actually listens to the show, Jade. It's fine. This is more like therapy. You just let it out.
All right. Perfect. Where do I send the check to? And do you send me a self-addressed stamped envelope for the check, or do I have to address it myself? That's called a callback, Tom. You're supposed to laugh at that.
Yes. Come on.
That's all
right. I was laughing. I just had it on mute.
Yeah, sure you did.
Skips.
So Daryl puts this seminar together. A bunch of these dudes are there, right? And Steve Tarani is there.
Oh, wow.
I'll pause while you Google that name.
Yep, I know who that is.
So Steve Tarani is there. And Daryl at this time I think Steve Ryan had made some of the first trainers for Steve Tarani. I know there's a lot of Steves going on there, and so he had trainers, he had aluminum ones, and Steve Tarani whips out with this shit that almost nobody, it was like watching the UFC for the first time. Watching this 6 foot, I think Steve's 6'3", 6'4", I don't know. Watching this tall dude drop down to the ground with this whippy spinny knife that's got a hook on it and a ring on it, and his finger's sticking in the ring, and the hook is hooking people's ankles and groins and then cutting throats and extending and cutting and all kinds of crazy shit that most of us hadn't seen yet. And I'd been around knives my whole life, and I hadn't seen that one. So at that show, Ernie's like, I need to make a folder of this. And Mick and Dwayne are like, we want to make a fixed blade of that. That fucking show was the hub for all of that craziness that all these hooky, spinny ring knives came from. I'm not saying it didn't exist before, because I think Steve Ryan had made a couple folders before. I'm pretty sure he had. So Steve had made a few, but they weren't mainstreamed yet. There wasn't a Blade magazine article about it. Nobody was making massive productions of them, right? It was like maybe you had one custom or something like that. But it was that show for that. So I'll try to, I think I captured those pictures and I'll repost it. And you can see Daryl Bulkey standing there with his stupid mustache and his bald head because he could grow hair, and his little Eagle fanny pack with his gun in it. All of us on the mat doing crazy stuff. Ernie's in one of the pictures doing a flippy spinny thing. And anyways, that's where that happened there.
Wow. The epicenter of the Karambit explosion.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. Like, again, I don't want to misrepresent. I know, I'm pretty sure Steve Ryan had made a couple folders before that, but it wasn't mainstream. Nobody really did anything with it, at least not on a semi or regular production level.
Yeah.
But all those came from that. And Tarani was nuts, man. He could move so fast with that thing. It was crazy. It was scary.
Wild.
I don't know how I ended up there, but I ended up there. I wrote notes down. I can't even read my notes, so I don't even know where I'm at with that. But
we sometimes cool. Tell listeners up front that, like, when we do these episodes where we make picks, right? Like, oh, here's a scenario. What would you take for a folder and a fixed blade? You know, and so we always tell people, or history episodes, right? Like, get the Google machine warmed up, right? If you're listening, don't do it when you're driving, because you're going to want to Google shit, and you should not Google while you drive.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a bunch of, well, I already have thrown a bunch of names out that people maybe haven't known. Or
was it M1 Michelle working with Tarani?
Michelle did some stuff with Tarani after that. So Michelle did some stuff with Tarani probably. Well, Michelle was also involved in that Kempo Karambit guy, with that Kempo Karambit group. And that's where I ended up with this. So we're doing, man, I feel really bad. I can't remember his name. He was really cool. So it was like a free thing in the park on Sundays, and there's just a group of us showed up. Yeah, Michelle showed up to several of those events. And that's where I met Jerome French.
Yeah.
And we became friends mostly because I kept stabbing him in the throat with a trainer.
Yeah. It's the fastest path to friendship is stabbing a man in the throat.
He's a big dude. He was a Kenpo black belt, which is cool if you're 12, not so cool when you're a 35-year-old dude, but that's great. I'm gonna have some Kempo dude looking for me at the next show.
Exactly.
I'll cut
a big
hair.
giant Kempo dude.
Yeah, so Jerome French and I became friends, and Jerome's like, dude, you should get on this this internet forum called the Usual Suspect Network. And I'm like, all right, what's an internet forum? Because I wasn't a gamer. I wasn't in chat rooms. I didn't do any of that stuff. I don't even think I looked at internet porn. But, well, maybe I did. But I didn't know what any of that stuff was. So Jerome's like, yeah, you got to get on it. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. So he comes over to my house. I get on this half-assed desktop that I had, and he gets me on, and he gets me a login. He's like calling somebody or emailing someone, because nobody texted really back then,
right?
And they got me. I don't know if he texted Mayor.
Probably Barry.
Could have been Barry, but it was obviously somebody at the admin level, and like, hey, let this guy on, because I think I had an AOL email address, and they didn't like that, so they're like, yeah, let this guy on, he's all right. And I got on then.
You kind of it helped to have a reference.
You had to have a reference, I think, back then. You had to have somebody, if you had a shady email or
Hotmail.
Yeah, if nobody knew who you weren't getting on. They weren't going to approve your access. But Jerome was very well connected in that community, and he vouched for me. Maybe that's why he doesn't talk to me. But he convinced me to get on. I got on, and I started looking around. I'm like, oh, this is cool, and seeing knife groups and different things. And so I was on that for about a year.
Jade, were you working with Rick then?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
And became good friends with Josh then. He was at Strider, and they had their Badlands forum as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And they said, and Josh, and they're like, hey, can you so the skull bead, which is really the reason I'm on the show, I'm sure, is, back then there was there was maybe a $19 Schmuckatelli skull bead, and that was probably the most expensive skull bead on the market. Steel Flame didn't exist.
Right.
The guy Santee didn't exist. Nobody. There was no jewelry section on the forum. They created that because I asked them to.
Schmuckatelli is like a serious throwback name too, right? That's another Googler for a lot of people.
All kinds of names getting from the throwback machine coming up today.
Yeah, I that's all I do is drop names. I don't even know how to spell them. It's SCA. Couldn't spell it.
Yeah, with the LLI on the end. That's all I know.
Yeah, and I'm not. And again, he's a great dude. Not. But that was the top tier at that thing. So I talked to Rick and I say, hey, some of these guys, because I had one on my knife. He had made this bead. It wasn't for a lanyard bead. It was part of a pendant. This whole thing that he had, and the bead sat on the pendant post. So I took one out of the drawer. I tied it onto my Strider knife, which was, I think then it was a first gen. Didn't even have the Hinder lock bar stabilizer, and it was just an SNG.
Yeah.
And I still have my GB numbered for. Anyways, so I go, hey. So some people saw it at some of the, I think it was at the Plaza show. You know, there were still shows going on. We didn't really have the USN meetups that happened a couple of years after that and then continued on.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, some of these guys, I bet you we could sell some of these as beads that go on their knife lanyards. I go, can we sell these? And he's like, well, the cheapest we could sell it for would be like $85 because of, that's just our market. And I go, well, let's see what happens. So we did a special bead for that Badlands knife for their Badlands forum and attached it to, I don't even remember, it was a gunner grip knife, and I don't know if it was an SMF or an SMG. Tied it to that, and then they sold. And then more people wanted them. And I'm like, they want to buy this bead, and it's expensive, especially then. And
right.
We were the first ones in the market that had a higher end, price point like that. And they worked. So we did more of them. And then that's when I realized, again, like-minded people find like-minded people. I bet you all these freaking nerds on this interwebs forum that like guns and knives like I do would also like this other cool silver stuff like I do.
Yeah.
So I talked to Josh and I said, hey, what's the next show you're going to? And it's New York Custom Knife Show. Back when it was actually in New York. Right. So that was November of 05, maybe. It wasn't 04. I think it was 05. Steve Delac show out in New York.
Yep.
So it was in New York. It was in the cheesy basement of that one really nice hotel, but it was a weird, shady basement. So I go, hey, I want to go to this knife show. I want to take some of our stuff because like a lot of things, you can't appreciate some of these things unless you hold it.
Yeah.
When you hold it and you see it and you're like, okay, there's depth, there's dimension, there's weight, there's all of those things. I said, I want to go to the show. I don't know if we're going to sell anything, but I want to go. And I went. He's like, yep, all right, go ahead. Went out and, it wasn't a blowout, but it was a matter of exposing people to that. Did not do the East Coast show. I think Blade Show was the next show we went to in Atlanta. And then it started snowballing from there.
Yeah.
I think at our peak, we did I was going 8 shows in 1 year, like 8 shows a year.
Wow.
It was a lot.
Ooh.
So prior to that, all of the stuff that Rick was doing was jewelry stuff, right? Like bracelets, necklaces, that kind of
big
chain,
rings,
kind of
bracelets.
Stuff.
Yeah, he had the whole line. Not as much. There was a little bit of American sales, but not much. The main stuff was in Japan.
Wow.
Yeah, and then that stuff just took off. And even Derek, Steel Flame Derek, he's been on multiple interviews. You guys had him on,
yeah.
But he'll even say, yeah, it was because of the Starlinger crew that I realized I could do, because he was doing other jewelry stuff, not in that market or in that arena. And it was an evolutionary leap in that part of the market, which is cool. I mean, I was glad to have been a part of it. I was glad to incorporate as many of my friends' companies as I could. We did a lot of stuff, collaboration stuff with Strider. I did a couple bead projects on my own. I did one for Charles Marlowe and
Right.
did a couple different beads for him. So I enjoyed it, having that opportunity and that exposure. And the shows were a hustle. They were a grind. But
Yeah.
I'd carry all of our merchandise. So I'd have it in a backpack and a roller, and my backpack would be like 65 pounds, running through the airport.
Yeah.
Everybody else is going, guys like all of you guys that can make 6 knives and go to a show and that's a full load. And that's an easy commute. I'm trudging pounds and pounds of stuff. And I was like, oh, this is rough, but it was fun. I enjoyed every bit of it, getting to see different parts of the country and different makers and all that. It was awesome.
That had to really be a shift for Starling Gear as a company, right? To going from being a jewelry focused, not that this other stuff isn't really basically jewelry, right? But people
it's all creative, artistic expression in that precious metal form. Holy shit, I gotta write that down. Creative, artistic expression in precious metal form. I seriously just came up with that. That's I'm done for the week now.
I'm out.
Wednesday. Yeah, and I've always said he is the most creative artist, and I've been fortunate to be around a bunch of them. The most creative artist out there that can work in any medium, whether it's carve it, oil paint it, computer design it, sculpt it in clay, or interior design it. That is not crazy and hasn't chopped his ear off and mailed it to his ex-girlfriend or something.
Right,
He's just
right.
at that level. So shifting the focus slightly onto that type of creative outlet was, yes, it was a shift in what he was doing at the time. And I'm still glad to have been, I'm not saying instrumental in that, but I definitely had a hand in where we focused a little bit, which was awesome. That was good stuff.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a huge piece of it is, and this is, I think, the case for lots of makers or creative people, is recognizing the opportunity, right? And there's a lot of really talented people in the world that in many cases suck at recognizing an opportunity, right? Or
they suck at dealing with people, or they
Right.
suck at writing checks, or they suck at following through. There's a lot of 80%ers out there that get 80% done with it, and they're like, it's good enough.
Yeah.
And then they can't run a production level of it, which is what I did, is run the production level of it. Hey, here's this cool creative piece. Now hand that off to me, and now I make 30, 40, 50 of that one piece. Because most artists or creatives don't want to make 100 of the same thing.
Right.
At least in my experience. They want to make one creative outlet, go on to the next one, or maybe a version of that. But, like going back to Alex Collins, I don't think he ever made 2 of the same knife. But he would have customers that wanted the same knife, and he would never do it. But if you've got somebody that can handle the production part of that and hand it off, and so that's what I did. And when we're able to get other guys in the shop, we do that part of it as well.
Oh, that's very interesting history.
Yeah, I trip out on. I was telling somebody. Well, so Ryan Johnson and I we drove to the Texas show. Him and I drove together last weekend, and also drove back. We didn't leave each other there.
No man left behind. It's an RMJ requirement.
We made it out. We made it back, and we were telling life stories and this and that. And I feel very fortunate to have been right place, right time, with the right focus to see different opportunities and different things either occur in front of me, or the opportunities to allow me to participate in whatever that is. But so much of it is just timing and being able to see it, which is
right.
I'm glad that so many of those things happened right in front of me.
So you spent a bunch of years at Starling Gear, right? How many?
17, just shy of 17, I think.
Wow.
yeah, we moved the company up to Portland, Oregon, opened a bar up there, and I put on a show up there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
That was more of that's Steve Kelly's fault, actually. That fucking guy.
There's a lot of things that are Steve Kelly's fault.
Yeah. So I know you're gonna be shocked by this, but I have a story for that. So
No.
we're leaving the New York Custom Knife Show, which at this time is now the New Jersey Custom Knife Show.
Right.
And we would always end up, because we both flew Delta, and we'd always end up at least on the similar time for our departures. So we were in the sushi bar restaurant at the airport, and we're talking, and I'm like, man, we need something like this on the West Coast. We need a higher end limited. And we had done at the Bible Club bar, I had put together an event for Starling Gear fans at the bar. So 2017, it was spring of 2017. We didn't know if anybody would come out for it, but we made it available, and we blocked off the bar just for that event and for that weekend. We had a blast. It was fun. People came from all over the country for that, all the way from the East Coast, and flew out for that. And so I knew there would be some people that wanted to come out and see that type of thing. And Steve's like, dude, you should just do a show. And I'm like, man, I don't think I can do a show. I don't have the time. There's so many shows going on. When do you plug a show? Where do you squeeze one in? How do you,
Right.
that was November of 2017. I'm like, I don't see logistically how that works. I don't see it. But I also knew I had a lot of connections in that town because of our bar and the people that we knew, and for venues and things like that. And I'm like, well, all right, maybe I could do like a small thing. Because in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of knife makers up there. There's major companies up there, right?
Yeah.
There's like 5 major companies all within 20 miles of downtown Portland. And there's a ton of individual makers out there. I'm like, I bet you I can get at least one company to send a guy, and I could probably get 5 or 6 makers that'll drive up. And I, again, fortunate to have the relationships that I developed over the years, could literally open up my phone contacts and find a bunch of makers that people would want to come and see. Because it doesn't matter if I like them, which
Right.
I do, obviously, but are other people going to come out and see these guys, and do I have room? So I start putting together a list. I start sending out texts and phone calls, and get a venue going. And I'm like, oh shit, I guess we're going to do a show. So we did that first year, and I tried to come up with the most ridiculously obnoxious long name for a show. So it was the Northwest Hand-Built Invitational.
Has the most letters of any show.
Yeah. I tried to get all of them in there, and I kept it. I didn't put Portland in it. I wanted to keep it. What if I have to move it? Like, what if I want to go to Washington or Bay Area or somewhere close? I'm like, well, at least I was smart enough to do that, and pulled that show off. But I mean, I had some East Coast guys. Sal Monero flew out from New York. John Gray came out. David Sharp came up from California. So I'm not trying to leave anybody out, but I had 20 tables, and Derek from Steel Flame came up. It was great. So I ended up doing that for 2 years in a row, and which was weird because the second year we had sold the bar.
Yeah.
So I didn't have immediate access, but I knew that the guy that bought it was a friend of ours, and I'm like, hey, I want to hold this event. I need the bar for Friday night. I'll buy it out, and I just need my people. I said, I'll work the door. I'll work it like I used to. And he's like, yeah, cool. Do whatever you want. So that was cool. So I still had access to the bar, but we technically didn't own it anymore. We had sold it, which was nice because we sold it a year before COVID hit.
That's one show I never went to that I wish I did. Like you said, only having a couple years, but by all accounts, just an awesome time.
It was fun. The venue we had it in was a 100-year-old warehouse. The beams run across the ceiling were as big as your fridge. It's nuts. It was a cool location. The bar was fun. It was pre-COVID, so it wasn't too crazy. And I didn't charge a lot of money. I think some people I didn't even charge any money. Some people I did. But I got some, and then I was surprised because there were people like, well, why didn't you invite me? And I'm like, well, shit, man, I didn't mean to offend anyone. I wasn't trying to shun anybody. I really wasn't. It's not like I was trying to be elitist about it. I say that for my personal life, but I really wasn't. I didn't think, first of all, I didn't think half these people would even want to come to something I was doing or take my phone call. So the next year I had a few more people come in and it was fun, but holy shit, was it a lot of work. That's where I don't think people understand how much work it is to put on like you see Steve Delac at the New York show, or thank God he's going to keep it at Nashville again this year. So it'll be the Nashville, New York Custom Knife Show. How much work at a smaller level, even Alicia does for Blade Show, even though she has a little bit bigger team, it is exhausting to put on an event like this. And I'll be sitting with Steve sometimes the night before, or in fact, I was sitting with Alicia the night before, and somebody was texting her like, hey, what time can I load in, and where's a good place to eat? And I'm like, give me that fucking guy's number. Do you really not have Google Maps on your phone and you can't figure out where a restaurant is the night before the show, where the person in charge of the show is like pulling her hair out and sweating and can't, like, it is exhausting. But I was able to pull off a decent show from the ground up, which was fun. So I the proof of concept worked. And I know Billy and Nick are trying to do the same thing again this year, and I think they've got a good foundation for it. I'm just concerned about what's still going on in that area, but they're good dudes. They've got a great lineup. They've got good support. I think it'd still be a really, and look, it's a beautiful part of the country. It's a great area for that. So I hope I think they'll do well with it. It seems like they've got it under control, but I know how much work that is. And I don't think most people do, unless you've put on some kind of, maybe you were a wedding planner or you put on some kind of event and all dealing with all the catering issues and bar license and temporary this or permanent that, or if you're trying to do it on the cheap, how do you go around it? And
right.
And it's a lot, and I was not cut out for that. But
Billy's talked to us a couple times about, like, holy shit, this is a way bigger project than we thought it was. And,
dude, it's especially when you're starting from scratch. Like, if you were to pick up somebody else's show, like there's guys in the business that have done that. They bought somebody else's show, or they picked up, where they wanted to leave off. That's at least a little bit of a head start, a little bit, because maybe you've got a contract from the previous person, or you've got a vendor list or whatever. But when you're starting it from scratch and you don't even think about the details that you didn't think about until it's either too late, and then that just gets expensive. But I have gotten pissed at a couple of guys. They're like, hey, at a show that wasn't my show, but at somebody else's show that I was exhibiting at, like, hey, you think you can hook me up with a badge? I'm like, motherfucker, you can spend the $25 that it takes to go to this guy's show, because even if he's making a little bit of money, he's working, or she's working to get this stuff done. It is especially after I put my own show on, I would never do that. I got really pissed at that when people would do that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, help him. Like, I know guys that I talked to one guy in Texas. He bought a ticket because he couldn't even go, but he'd still buy a ticket because, hey, I'll help support. I'll buy a ticket because it's a lot of work.
Right.
Shit. How many are you guys? Is there an over-under game on how many rants I can squeeze into this one podcast? Because I got 12 more minutes of this one,
flying.
And then
you're flying.
I can start another one.
Why don't you? Maybe it's probably hard to explain, but I think there's a bunch of people who've never been to a show, so they don't have any comprehension at all. Then, especially nowadays, right? It's like even makers, right? We'll get into that rant later, but right, who are like,
I got a whole page on that one.
about not ever doing a show at all, or people that haven't had the experience. Then there are people that go to shows, and because they hop on a plane, grab a rental car or a Uber, show up at a hotel that they reserve for themselves in a room, right? And they walk into a big room with a bunch of makers that they know, and they're like, how hard could a show be? Right? Like, you get the room, you get a bunch of people that, sell knives anyway. So maybe give people an idea of why it's so hard. I mean, you touched on some of the stuff, but
sure. So
just for context,
I can give. I've helped some people with their shows. Like I did that one event for Alicia for the kitchen knife cutting competition, and but from my personal experience for my show, and I'm not saying I did it the right way. There's probably other ways to attack the problem, but I had 2 caterers. Brady Miller is a good friend of mine. He is like legit has to be gluten free, right? He's got the celiac and the Crohn's and the whole all the other stuff. So him being a good friend, I would always, whenever we'd go to eat, I'd always be mindful of that. So I wanted to have at least one caterer that could handle that type of menu. So I had that, and then I had another vendor. I had 2 food vendors. I had alcohol. I had to get an alcohol license for my event because I was using it just basically a warehouse. So I had to bring that permit in.
Yeah.
And find all of those people. If you hire a location that has all that takes a little bit off of your plate. They have catering, they have bar service, they have wait staff, they have all that. But they're way more money.
Right.
Way more money for that. And it's not that I was trying to be cheap. I had a plan when I did it. I put, I think, 25 grand aside. And I'm like, look, if I don't make a dime and I only lose 25 grand, but everybody has a good time, cool. Yeah. Fortunately, I had some very good friends like Steve Kelly, like Mick, like Derek, that donated ridiculous things that brought stupid money that covered any loss I was going to have. Yeah. So I was fortunate that way. Had I not had that, and I got to give a shout out to my good friend Mike, Easy Rider Mike, who did all of the legwork that I could.
Yeah.
Had I not had that, I would have lost 19, 21 grand somewhere in there.
Wow.
Because you got to book, and that's not counting the Friday night bar event. That was separate, but that covered itself. And I wanted it to be a party event. I didn't want it to feel like this is a sale, come buy stuff and transactional, and that's it. I didn't want to be so cold, and I tried to make it like a party event. But so all of those things, do I have enough restrooms? Is the venue that if you're trying to create your own venue, do you have restrooms? Do you have water? Do you have coffee service? Do you have, if you have to put all that stuff together, it's way more difficult than getting a venue that has it. But if you get a venue that has it, then you're talking about a hotel. You have to guarantee the room sales. You got to guarantee your bar sales. You got to guarantee your food or pay up front because you're going to provide the food. So then you're paying for that, and you got to guarantee bar sales or back it up. I know guys that have done shows that have lost money because they didn't sell enough hotel rooms because people didn't want to pay for the extra $39 a night at the venue hotel. They wanted to go down the street and save that money. So then a person that paid for that put the show on didn't sell enough hotel rooms, and then they lost money on that part of it. Every single thing where somebody hands $1 back and forth, the person that puts on the show has factored that in. Either they're going to eat it, or they're going to cover the money, or they're going to make a little bit of money on it. But those formulas are running through your head. I mean, a guy like Steve has been doing it long enough. And he's got a good staff that handles it for him. But for like Sacco's taking on a bunch of new shows, and he is hustling out there. He's putting on, trying to make, and it's kind of maybe the way I see shows going is maybe slightly smaller, but more regional, because who wants to fly these days? I don't want to fly. Yeah. If I don't have to, I'd rather do the 12, 13 hour drive and not fly. He's hustling to make regional shows for different parts of the country. Blade Show is trying to get all of their different blades going so that people don't have to necessarily travel as far or fly as far or whatever. I don't know. I don't even know what the question was. What was the question? How much does it cost and why?
Well,
it costs a lot of money.
Why it's hard. Yeah.
That's why it's hard.
Yeah.
If you you can't do it alone. If you think you can, I'm going to put together a show and I'm going to have a couple guys. I mean, even it's Scott's show in Kentucky, right? That blew up into something bigger.
Right.
All good intentions go. All these things that start with good intentions, they go sour pretty quick. Either you get soured by it or everybody else gets soured by it, unless you can find that magic formula, which I kind of clung to for 2 years. I probably wouldn't have pulled it off the third year if COVID wouldn't have hit. I don't think I would have been able to do it.
Yeah.
In fact, I know I wouldn't have done it because COVID didn't hit. Our company plan was go to Japan for our 20th anniversary of the company, and it would have been the same time, so I wouldn't have done it. But then that happened, and everything else went.
Everything changed.
Haywire, as they say on the farm.
Yeah, very interesting. I think, like you say, people underestimate the show thing, what goes into it, and I think don't really give, in many cases, the person that puts on the show the respect for the experience that they just had. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, they kind of look past that whole piece.
Well, if the show goes good, if all the bar service is there, if all the food is where it should be, if all the toilets work and nobody floods one, if the carpet is clean and the lights work and the temperature is right, it's not too cold, it's not too hot. If everything works right, nobody notices.
Exactly.
Or very few. I shouldn't say nobody, but less people notice. Everything worked the way it should have. Cool. When one thing goes bad, oh, the bathroom was down, we had to go over here. They only had one bar, and I had to wait 27 minutes, and whatever the issue. That's when the complaints start rolling. So it's always a case of things go well, then it's okay. But when things go bad, everybody wants to talk about it, and it's nobody that's putting on a show, at least nobody that I know, and I know just about everybody in the knife show business currently in America, nobody's trying to suck at it.
Right.
They're not. They're trying to put on a good event. They want their makers to be happy. They want the vendors to be happy. They want the people coming through the door. They want to have enough ratio of people behind the table to people in front of the table, because that ratio is tricky. On a bigger show, maybe it's not so tricky because you have so many people. On a smaller show, do I want one maker for every 10 people coming through the door? Do I want 20 customers for every table? Like, where is that magic number? Do I want makers that are all at a $950 folder price point, or do I want some that are $750 and some that are $1,450? And what kind of buyers can I bring in? That's the kind of shit that kept me up at night the first time.
Yeah.
And I was prepared. Like I said, I was prepared to lose money. I was also prepared to buy something, like at least 2 things from everybody that came to the show in case they weren't selling anything. Because I didn't know if everybody was going to show up. Because I made the dumb mistake of not, at least Billy didn't do this one. I didn't sell tickets ahead of time. I said, yeah, I believe you. I trust you. Just come pay at the door. Yeah. Well, nobody told me otherwise in the first place.
Right.
I was fortunate that everybody that said they were going to, with the exception of like 2 people, showed up and paid.
Yeah.
And if I ever see those 2 people again, I don't know who they are. I didn't keep a list. I kept a list for a year, but I let that shit go. Yeah, like the Billy and they were smart enough that way. They're like, hey, pay up front, and he posted up about it. He's like, if you there's no refunds,
right? And
he's right, because it's too difficult. You can't deal with that. So
yeah,
I think like we were at the Texas show. Tom was there.
Yep.
We had. I'm still learning where our show presence should be with RMJ, because it's a different situation. But we were very well received. We had a super high end knuckle project that we did. We cast one of our snuckles, which is our textured brass knuckles, but we cast one out of solid sterling silver. So it was 16 and a half ounces of cast silver, and Ryan did this cool hand stitched leather book that that held the knuckles. We did a leather certificate and all that. So we had a showpiece there, and it was very well received. We were fortunate that way, and everybody that I saw had people in front of their tables. It seemed like there was a lot of business going on. It seemed like it was a really good turnout, and you need not just the same people coming to shows, but you need locals coming to the show, right? A little bit of a new crowd, a little bit of regional people coming that you might not necessarily see at Blade West or at Nashville or the Gathering in Vegas. So you need a little bit of that, or maybe a lot of that, depending on who you are. And I think Texas had a great balance of that. We talked to a lot of people that had never seen our stuff, never handled it before, but they had seen it online, which again, the main reason to go to a show is so people can I always say it's more fun when you touch it and then they laugh and touch it. So
who doesn't want to touch it?
Well, I'm just saying I'm not allowed to go back to Ohio because of that. But.
All right. So you spent a bunch of years at Starling Gear. Then
yes.
For everybody, the world changed, right?
Correct.
COVID happened.
On many levels.
Shit got weird, top to bottom, left to right, you name it. Shit got super weird for a little while. So your situation changed, right? And that's when you went to RMJ?
I went, so we did SHOT Show that year. Derek had a Steel Flame private event in February of that year of 2020.
Yep.
He invited us down. I went down for that. COVID hit, and whatever happened, and my work situation changed. I went, I have a good friend who has a gun store out in Oregon. They sell rifles. I'll let you guess the name of the store. Oregon Rifle Works. Again, not all my friends are that creative with the names of their stores, right? You got Ontario Police Equipment, right? Ontario or Oregon Rifle Works. But so I went and helped him out with that for a while. He had me come in and work behind the counter, and that's when we thought this was going to kill all of us, and we couldn't touch anything. And
right.
We were wearing gloves and masks for like a day, and I'm like, nah, this is bullshit. So that didn't last. So I worked there for helping him out on some odds and ends. And then I was in a fortunate position where phone calls and text messages started to come in when people started to find out that I was available to possibly look for new employment. And again, it was a rough period. I've had a couple of those. One was getting let go from law enforcement, and then that situation was a little weird as well. But I'd been through it before, so I was familiar with the symptoms of alcoholism, and I got through. And then the phone calls and texts came in, which was an amazing feeling. And when I say I'm fortunate to have the contacts in my phone that I do, and the reception that I do in certain arenas, I can't express that enough without crying. And Tom said this is a no crying show, so I can't cry.
Tom, let him cry, Tom.
Oh, I said
Leslie would never let me forget it if he heard me cry on the show.
We're pretty sure Leslie cried at some point, but
he did.
Because he was coughing so hard.
He did. I saved the tissue. Yeah, so a few calls came in, a few messages, and RMJ was one of them through Brady. And Brady's like, "Hey, I think he convinced them that I could do just about anything." And I'm not sure what words he used, but whatever they were worked. I'm still hoping I can pull that off. But flew out, talked to them, and for the first time ever, because there was no New York Custom Knife Show that year, I was able to go out and shoot the Daryl's revolver roundup. I'm a big fan of revolvers. I carry them quite a bit. I mean, I went to the academy with one, so I have a little bit of a special place in my heart for them. So I was able to shoot Daryl's revolver roundup in Texas, went out and did that, thought about the RMJ thing. And then went back out there again, and in December, I took my girlfriend / fiance out there and said, "Hey, do you think you could come out here and be out here?" And she's like, "Yeah, I think so." I'm like, "All right, cool." Then I probably wouldn't have considered it otherwise.
Yeah.
But then I started talking to them seriously after the new year, so January of 2021. And I was kind of working remotely, helping with some phone conference calls and putting together some programs for them. And then had to have... So when you turn 50, there's certain medical procedures you have to have done, right?
Tell us more.
So
Tom just experienced that.
Yeah. Yep. So I turned 50 September of 2020, and I didn't want to take a job in a new state and not have I had really good medical at the time, and mostly because Jennifer got it for me because I didn't know how to do that, but she got it set up. So she's like, "Hey, you got to get this stuff taken care of before you move." And I'm like, okay. So that was fun. Yeah. And then another small but awkward medical procedure in the same region.
Yes.
And so that got wrapped up in March, and I was supposed to be in Chattanooga in April, and I can't believe I'm telling this story, but fair play. So got that wrapped up. Everything went fine, no issues. Like, yep, clean bill of health, good to go. And then packed everything up and drove across. I drove by myself. She was going to follow me out afterwards and wrap some stuff up. And that was a rough. I didn't realize how rough it was going to be in the seated position for that long in that car ride. So that was a little bit rough. And it wasn't supposed to go like that. This is how screwed up things were. I had a reservation for a giant U-Haul, like a 26-footer, and then one small storage box, like the U-Packet box, that thing. And a week before they were supposed to charge my credit card, which was 2 weeks before I was supposed to move, they called and canceled. Oh. And I said, well, I go, what do you mean you canceled? Like, it has a flat tire. You got to find a new one with a new transmission. What? He goes, no, there was not a U-Haul, any size or trailer available to go from the West Coast to the East Coast for 6 months after that date.
Wow.
And I said, well, what if I go down to California and get one, or go to Washington, or go to Idaho? And they go, there isn't one. There is not one.
Wow. I'm
like, oh, that's bad. So that changed. I had to change my moving plan and get another big, one of the big, I can't think of the brand, but it's that big white with the red lettering, and you pack it up, and it's like the big container, and they ship it out. So then that changed. And then I did so now I was behind schedule, do the hurry up and drive out. And I drove out, first weekend. So I didn't get to go to the Texas show last year because I was in the moving process. But this year made it out there. We made it, got stuff settled, and then just in time to get ready for Blade Atlanta.
Yeah.
And that was the first big show back for just about everybody, I think.
Right.
And that was awesome. And that's where I'm at now.
I think it made me think of it when you were talking about it, right? It's like, okay, yeah, having the list of contacts that you have, and ultimately, really, like we talk about the USN, and the network part of the name of the USN is real, right?
It's real.
Sure. And ultimately, that's the money, right? It's like, oh, you got a bunch of people's phone numbers is nice. What's really nice is there's a bunch of people who actually give a fuck, right? Or that you could reach out to and say, yo, I need to do this, or I need your help, or would you give me an opportunity, or, you know what I mean? That stuff matters. And I think that's one of the super cool parts about this whole scene is it's kind of tight, right? I mean, if you develop those relationships with people, it matters a lot, right? And it matters in weird ways. Like,
it matters if you don't,
crazy ways.
it matters if you don't suck. If you suck at life,
Yeah.
and you suck at interpersonal skills, then that tight knit group of people is gonna figure that out pretty quickly. And then if you're good at it, or you are genuine, or you are sincere, or you do bring whatever to the table, that it goes in your favor. Especially back then when it was newer, it was a very strong vetting process for across the board for every group that was on there, whether you were in the EDC group or the Strider page or our page or Derek's page or one of all the knife makers that had their pages on there. Those group they got narrowed down even more and refined even more to sometimes a little bit much. I had one guy like, well, you don't know anything about this, and I'm like, I might. So there is some education that occurs in both directions, but I think it has been a great and networking. Kind of sounds like good old boy Yale Law School kind of thing, maybe, but
yeah,
I don't think it's at that level. I think there is, like, if you go to the gathering and you run into people that maybe you don't see just at that show, or you only see on the forum, and then you see them once every other or 2 years at the show. There's a good camaraderie and a good sense of. I'm running out of words now. I didn't eat dinner tonight. You guys are like, yeah, we'll start at 7. I'm like, when do I eat?
There's real relationships in there. That's the thing for me that matters. Yeah. And I am extremely thankful for having had not just, the specific USN experience, but all the stuff that comes along with it. Right. Or even just being involved with makers or even just friends that are collectors in the community. Right. That it's like, it's not often that I have a situation where I'm like, wow, I need some advice on this, or someone's opinion on a certain thing, or a technical issue, or a legal question. It doesn't matter.
Outside of that, it goes outside of that little niche. Like you may be friends with a dude that's into fidget spinners and flashlights, but he also sells cars in Ohio.
Right.
And that's a real person. I'm talking about a real person there, and you're like,
yeah.
Oh, and I need help with this. And you can reach out to that person and said, what should I do with this situation? And you're right. Legal situation.
Yeah.
I know 3 firsthand accounts of situations that Larry Brahms has helped people with, unrelated to knives or like forum stuff.
Right.
That goes, that crosses all that. Once you make those relationships, and they're pretty solid. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of those solid ones. It's not just like, oh, I've got these leads in my Rolodex and I can make sales calls. Yeah, you're right. It's very, it's a great source of networking for life, really.
Exactly.
I would say that 90% of my adult friends for the last 15 years have been because of the USN. You know? I think that's probably pretty close to the norm for people at the level that have been there for that long. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and interestingly enough, it is a network. I remember one year at Blade, one of my customers might have taken in some adult beverages and cut their finger with one of the TK9 Bowies I had that he had purchased.
Oh,
pretty bad. Like did nerve damage and some stuff like that. One of my other customers at the show ended up being a hand surgeon and took care of him, I think, for free.
Oh,
which kind of crazy.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah, and it is a good sampling of like you're going to see people from all walks of life in there, and all like you said, hand surgeon to car salesman to mechanic, whatever. They're all in there.
Yeah.
And it is nice because I've said it before, we are all kids that are now grown-ups with grown-up bank accounts and grown-up phones and grown-up credit cards that like to play with all these toys, but that the professions cross all spectrums.
Yeah.
I don't think that made any sense.
It didn't flow like your
I'm telling you, man, well, I got these
ad
chocolate chips here. I'm gonna gas up, but yeah.
So let's talk shows, because I know you wanted to touch on that. Things are changing, right? Things are changing rapidly. Some of it in the wake of COVID, I think. Some of it because of the way shows have, I don't know, for a while it kind of exploded, and we would talk on here about, there's so many shows, right? You got to kind of start to pick and choose at some point. Where are you going to invest your time?
I think it was happening before COVID. I think that's kind of why I wanted to do my experiment with it and see if that could be a thing. I'm not saying it's the answer. I'm saying it was one experiment and it kind of worked. Blade Show, I've been going to Blade Show probably not as long as some of you guys. I think my first one was 06, I think. I was into knives and stuff, but I never really went to any shows other than local ones. I'd never traveled for shows. And Blade Show, as an example, has gone through quite an evolution as far as size, right? There was 1 year where they had shrunken that main floor down so much that you couldn't even, they brought that temporary curtain in. You couldn't even see the drive-in doors on the side of the hotel side.
Yeah.
So they'd shrunken that in probably 40 feet, maybe 50 feet. And it was only in that one room. And then it grew back up again. Then it went to other rooms and it comes back. Then COVID comes. So some people don't come. I've seen that show go up and down. Things like Steve's show, Delac show doesn't really change much in size, but I don't think he's doing his East Coast show anymore. His East Coast Custom Knife Show, which was like a February or March show. They went to Florida for a bit and it moved around.
Right.
So I don't think he's doing that one anymore. The Plaza Cutlery Show back in the early 2000s had their Friday night invitational. I remember seeing Ernie there. I think it was 04. And he had 4 rhinos on the table. It was the Friday night invitational only. He had 4 rhinos on the table. Those were the only knives he did, was 4 rhinos.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was nuts. And then Dan stopped doing that for a while. And then when Recon 1 took it over, they brought it back. So shows, I think like anything, they ebb and flow a little bit, and maybe artificially so, because maybe we're looking at the last show and going, how do we need to adjust based on the last show? And maybe we should look at it more long-term, like a longer graph as opposed to a short snapshot. But I think regional mid-size shows are kind of going to be a thing. I was saying that before COVID. Like Blade Show was doing their Blade Show West. Recon had a couple shows, and if you don't have to travel, because it's expensive. Like if you got to go right now, if I was to book a flight for one of the West Coast shows, I'm looking at $1,000, $1,200 for a round trip ticket.
Yeah, and
that ain't. I'm too old and lazy to fly cheap class, but that's not first class. That's mid-level. It's not cheap. So if I can drive to a show, even a 12-hour show, I can throw my rifle in the car. I don't have to micro pack. I can just throw some stuff in there. I don't have to worry about it. I can drive out. I don't have to deal with that expense. Yeah, gas is expensive and all that. But for me, any show that's within a 12, 13, 14-hour drive, I'm good. And I'm fortunate. We're fortunate here. We've got Atlanta Blade Show. We've got Texas. We've got Nashville. We've got Kentucky. That's 4 shows right there.
Right.
Do we need more than that? Does one person as a manufacturer or as a customer, as a collector, need more than that? I don't know. I've done the 8 shows in 1 year grind, and that's exhausting.
Yeah.
It gets to the point where you don't want to talk to anybody about your stuff. People would laugh or get angry because Josh and I would famously share a hotel room and hang out, but we wouldn't go down to the pit half the time because we're so exhausted. We just want to sit in the room with our shoes off and not talk to each other. Yeah, because it is exhausting when you're walking.
Yeah.
When your job is to talk to somebody about not that you don't enjoy it, but it's still an energy drain. Can you do 8 shows like that? I don't know. I think there's enough makers spread out throughout the country, and I'm just talking in the country. I'm not talking international makers and our friends from Canada and all that. But I think there's enough makers. Maybe we'll let Kirby in, but that are can go regionally. So there's enough makers to support mid-size regional shows, and I think there's enough collectors or customers or whatever you want to call it, because I've done both. I've bought things and I've hoarded things. I think there's enough on both sides of the table to support mid-sizey. And how do you define mid-size? I don't know. 100 tables, maybe less, maybe more. I don't know. But I think there's enough on both sides to support that model for a little while, at least until things calm down or whatever the contributing factors are to that.
We've talked a bunch about that regional show thing and even smaller stuff, right? I don't even, calling it a boutique show might not even be the right thing, but there's been kind of a growing example or series of, Tom did a pop-up thing, right? Where he went somewhere and a bunch of his collectors were there. And I know when you were at Starlink Gear, you guys did the trunk show stuff and you know what I mean? Yeah. So there's these smaller things that are happening, and we had we were seeing some growth of it before COVID, where it might be an event where there's 10 makers there, you know what I mean? Like real small stuff. And I thought those were super fun, right? Because you could actually talk to people, and right, it wasn't in this that show environment is awesome because the energy is really cool. It's also, like you said, it's exhausting, right? And sometimes the really, really small stuff is fun because you don't come away with that same exhausted feeling.
Yeah, you're not exhausted. And I'm not an out of shape person. I'm not saying I'm super fit guy, but I would stay in shape just to be able to survive the show pace.
Right.
That was my main motive. I was a partner in a CrossFit gym for years just to maintain that level of, I'm used to talking to people and I'm fit enough to survive the show schedule. But there's a lot of people that I'm not that level anymore, but yeah, it is exhausting, and it is nicer to have a smaller show. But then, like I said earlier, what's the ratio? If I've got 20 tables, I want to get 200 people through the door. Do I want 10 to 1? If I have 10 tables, do I want 100 or do I only want 50? And is it, is money a concern in that situation? Money, I mean sales money changing hands on both sides of the table. Is that a concern? Right. Maybe it's not a concern. Maybe this is we're going to show our stuff off and we're not even going to sell anything. You're going to come and look at an art show, and the artist is going to have one piece and only one person can buy it, but everybody gets to look and talk and develop new relationships and develop new, a collector is going to develop a new appreciation for this piece of art. And I say art, but it's a knife, folding, fixed blade, whatever. And that's, so kind of like a gallery experience.
Yeah.
Where it's sold, it stays on the table. Somebody gets to look at it and appreciate it, even though they didn't spend, they didn't camp out overnight and sneak their way in on a vendor pass so they can buy first.
Right.
I'm not saying anybody does that, but
no.
Right. But so the one piece that Tom makes gets to sit on the table. It's a more intimate environment. It's more of which is kind of what I was trying to do at my thing. I actually had a rule, and I came up with it on the fly. I came up with it like the day of the show, and I went down the line and I yelled so everybody could hear, because I'm not good with PA systems. And I said, everybody gets in, but nobody can exchange $1 for the first hour of the show.
Yeah.
Nobody can buy anything. Nobody can sell anything. And I made sure I told all the guys behind the table, said, if they want to stand by your table and wait for an hour, cool. But nobody can buy anything. And that I had many people come up to me afterwards and say, "Hey, that was a great idea," because then I got to talk about it and I got to look at it, and it wasn't just gone into somebody's backpack and getting shipped out of the country before I even got to look at it. And I didn't think it was a genius move. For some reason, I just thought, you know what, let's calm down a little bit and let's appreciate, because let's be honest, none of us are selling. Well, some of us maybe more than others, but for the most part, we're not selling food, shelter, or water, something that you have to have tonight because your life depends on it. Now, maybe some of us are, maybe on the RMJ side, we sell a few things that people really do need in certain circumstances. But for the most part, you don't need it right away, right? We want it. And we want to have it and admire it, or we want to put it in a plastic bin and put it on the third shelf down, fourth over, and never look at it again. I'm not saying that's me, but that might be me. But so let's take some time and appreciate some of this. And I think just from the past experience at Texas, there was some running, there was some first through the door purchases, but there was a lot more, and which I think is a good thing. I think that's hope for the future of these events. There was a lot more of looking at things and talking about things and appreciating things, which I think sets it up for the next purchase on the customer side and sale on the maker side. And it's a tough balance to find that, but I think some shows are pulling that off.
Yeah. I think it's you wonder how much of that is people kind of coming back to the scene post-COVID, right? Like the recovery phase where
they've been pent up a little bit and they want to let it out of the cage.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked down here before, and I talk about it a lot in real life with people, is it's like, people will talk about, COVID is so terrible and it's so shitty and fucked so many things up. And yes, it did. And you know what? It did some other shit that is not bad. Like people figuring out, wow, I really need to change something in my life, or wow, this person I'm with, I really either can't stand, or, what I mean? We got to make this work. And people who like had babies, right? And like when my kids were born, I was working. There was no dad leave. Right. And there's people that were like working from home during that time. And guess what? Here's a parent who never would have had the chance to be with a baby or a young child for that much time every day. And yes, it's hard trying to balance, work from home and doing that, but you can't get that time back, right? I never had that experience. And I look at some of those things and I'm like, man, I hope you're grateful for that, because, having that opportunity is pretty amazing. And I think people in some cases were able to kind of reassess a little bit, right? When you're kind of stuck at home for a while, it causes people to need to do a little introspective look, and that doesn't help everyone, right? Sometimes that actually fucks people up because they realize they got some demons they got to sort out. At the same time, there's many good cases of it too. So I don't know. It's a very interesting thing. So I'm curious to see, kind of like what you were talking about. Do we hang on to that, like refreshed look at things, or how long does it take to get back to where it was before, right? Where it was kind of like a turn and burn.
Wait, are you asking how long are these people going to remember the life lessons that they learned in the last 2 years? Because I'm going to go with the over under to that. Over under on that is 12 days. 12 days.
I know I'm being wishful.
But I agree with what you're saying. We should do that. From personal experience, I quit drinking. I'm not saying I don't have a drink occasionally, but I owned a bar for a while. I was in that scene. I quit drinking. I'm like, you know what? I want to have a clear head and really see what's going on here. And I know people that did the same thing. I know some people that picked up where I left off.
Right. Took it over.
but that's just one example. Some people picked up life skills.
Right.
How do you purify water? Maybe I should get in shape and do a push-up every now and then.
Right.
So, and then what can I reevaluate and see what's really important? Do I want? But then there's some of us that are, again, the 11-year-old kid with $100 bill burning through our pocket, and we got to go out and get something. So
Yeah.
I understand that part of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like seeing shows. I like going to shows. I think they're a great opportunity for commerce, and I think they're a great opportunity to get exposure to something in real life that you cannot get virtually. You can't see that. I think it was Lovelace's quote, whereas you want it to look good enough to pick up and feel good enough to not put down. Well, you can't do that through a computer screen. You have to do that in person. And I think it's an important part of our industry, but I don't know at what level is it sustainable. I don't know.
Let's talk about RMJ and what's going on with the family of companies kind of in that arrangement you talked about. There's a lot of cool shit going on. So one of the things we've said on here a bunch of times is how cool it is to see some of the wacky and awesome things that are going on and coming out of RMJ and surrounding entities, right? It's like, it's fun. It's cool as fuck, right? It's like, this is awesome.
Yeah. So no shit. There is no fear there. You guys want to make a billy club? Cool. We can make that. You want to make brass knuckles at a production level? All right, let's figure it out. Let's do that. And I think I described it before, and I've used the example of an 11-year-old kid with a 40-year-old bank account. We are 11-year-old kids in that shop with 40-year-old know-how and capabilities. And I mean, Ryan's like, yeah, we're going to do some nunchucks. They did a throwing star. Before I got there, they'd done a throwing star. Really? A throwing star? It's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, I have one. I mean, Charles, the guy who had to sharpen them, wasn't happy about it, but
sorry, Charles.
Yeah. So we're the main company, so RMJ USA or RMJ Tactical, if you want to go old school. That's, I mean, our premier metal stuff. So the Talon Tomahawk, the Kestrel, the Kestrel Feather, the Shrike, the S13, which is the shorter Shrike. That some of the knives, all that stuff comes out of the RMJ side of the house. You've got Ryan's Gold Point Forge custom shop, where he has his own area up at his own property, where he gets to do mad scientist stuff and go with wherever the inspiration takes him, whether it's woodworking or leather, hand stitching, metal forging, whatever. He gets to play with it on a laser. He's got that section going. We've got the American Tomahawk side of the house. We've got the classic Vietnam era style Tomahawk, the Model 1. We've got the Model 2 is a new design. That's our original design. We've got another one that we've got two more new things that we're working on now that haven't been fully realized yet. And then we've got the Chattanooga Leatherworks, which was originally started because nobody would make a leather sheath for RMJ. So they're like, well, fuck it. We'll just figure out how to do it ourselves, and we'll find somebody that can do it, and we'll teach them, or we'll learn it, and we'll do it. And now they're so good at it on that side of the house. We call them the glue sniffers. It's kind of funny if you do leather work because there's a lot of glue. Man,
tough crowd. So, they're so busy. They're so good at it and so busy on their side of the house that they're backed up with all the guys that they do leather and kydex for. And you see it scattered around different makers that have the Chattanooga Leatherworks leather, and some promote it, some don't. So I won't name any names on that side, but yeah.
And then making leather saps. When's the last time you saw somebody make at a production level? I'm not talking about one guy in his shop with a stitcher and some scrap shoe leather. Make a production level leather sap.
Right.
I mean, I carried one in the 90s, and for a couple of years when I wasn't supposed to. But we make it, and we machine our own molds to pour the lead. We insert the springs into the lead, so there's no weak connection point. And then it either gets hand stitched or machine stitched and finished out. We've done exotic hides. We get a bunch of exotics from Jerry Van Amberg, who I've known since 2002. So we've got some exotics, we've got some fun stuff, we've got some private label stuff. We're doing some branding. The first collab sap that we did with Strider, and Ryan designed it up. Sent a picture out to Josh and was like, yeah, let's make some. So we made a handful of those. We got more in the works. We're doing some private label leather saps for other companies. We do. So I do have an area in the shop that's my area where I can do some of the metal work. So finishing stuff out, designing stuff. We've got some 3D output capabilities. I'll do the wax work and all the stuff. A lot of the stuff that I used to do. Soldering and finishing out. And so we got silver logo caps that go on the saps and stuff like that. That's taken off a whole nother level that none of us really thought it would go that way. And everybody's like, oh, I want one of these. And it's another one of those things where you don't really know it until you at a show and you pick one up and like, oh yeah, I need one of these. It just feels good.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's awesome. That's a lot of fun. I've gotten to name a couple of those, which is kind of cool. And then we've got the precious metal side of the house. We got some pendants and some other stuff that we're working on in there. And like I said, we did that silver knuckle piece that we had available at Blade, Texas.
I saw some video of that. That was a super cool idea. Love that.
Dude, it came together way better than I could have thought.
Yeah.
And it was nice to be received publicly at that level with that item. That was a good feeling. That was nice.
Yeah. No, it's very, very cool. I think it's gonna be really interesting to see where all of that stuff goes next, right? Like you said, it seems like the growth is certainly the potential part is huge, right?
Sure.
I'm curious to see how it goes for you guys with growing it and which kinds of directions it goes in, because it's kind of going a whole bunch of them at the same time right now, which is really fun, but maybe not.
It's hard to
method
track
than it looks like.
Yeah, it's hard to track. There's a lot of spinning plates in that shop that is way more exhausting than I had anticipated.
Yeah,
because I'm used to, for the last 17 years or so, I was working in just one or two people in the shop quietly, not yapping at everybody. Now we've got 15 people in there. Everybody's got something going on. Something's breaking. Something needs to get fixed. An issue needs to get dealt with. This didn't get delivered on time, so we need to, we can't get biothane in because it's back ordered. We can't get snaps, so we got to shift to this. The supply chain issues have been challenging over the last year.
Yeah.
But that's tracking all of those is definitely challenging, and I think it's going to help keep me young, while at the same time make all my hair gray. But it's all right.
Yeah. Well, dude, thanks for taking us through all this. It's been a very, very fun conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. I hope I didn't rant too much, and I'm sure I lost a few people along the way. So maybe you just maybe you can chop this last 2.5 hours into about 12 minutes.
Well, if I take the rants out, there won't be much there.
Yeah, there's nothing left. There's no substance. If I don't.
You got any kind of parting rant you want to throw in before we wrap it up, or?
You didn't ask me my favorite movie knife.
Oh yeah, I've
been sitting on this answer because I'm ready.
He told me.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I told Tom. Never mind. I already told Tom.
You didn't tell me the knife. You said I had to wait.
That's Birch's
not
question. That's Birch's question. He's going to get upset if we don't let him ask it.
Okay, sorry.
Michael, do you have a question you would like to ask?
Yeah. What's your favorite annoying word, and why is it fricky?
Oh my God.
And why is it what?
Fricky.
Freaky.
I hate that so much.
Fricky, like
wait, that's
friction
somebody's
folder?
name.
Yeah, for like friction folders.
Oh, friction folders.
A Fricky, not a Frankie.
No. Movie knife.
Why
What's your favorite movie knife?
You know, I never thought about that. That's interesting you asked that question. Okay, so you got another 12 minutes? Here we go. So it's not my favorite movie knife is not a knife. My favorite movie knife.
Here we go.
My favorite movie knife is not a piece of metal. My favorite movie knife is a philosophy that goes with this movie knife.
Oh boy!
If you've seen the movie is Red Dragon, right? The prequel to the Hannibal Lecter
Oh yeah.
movies. Okay, so Edward Norton plays the FBI character that's closing in, and in an opening scene, he realizes, oh shit, this is the dude, right? So what happens is, right, he pulls his gun, gets jammed up, and Hannibal takes the gun. But what does he do? He goes to his second gun, his backup gun. Okay, that's important because in the end of the movie, he's at his house down in Florida. He gets a phone call. I forget that Fiennes' character, the bad guy, right? He's like, he's out and we don't know where he is. And he's like, so he freaks out. And that's when he realizes, oh shit, he's probably in my house. What does Ed Norton's character do? He pulls a kitchen knife. However, he pulls 2 kitchen knives.
Yeah.
Only time I've ever seen this. There's a whole butcher block full of knives right there. Everybody always just pulls one and walks around like they're going to save the world with one fucking cleaver. He pulls 2, right? Puts one in his back pocket, conceals it, and then keeps the other one out so it can be seen. And then when he's confronted, he drops it, then he pulls a second knife and goes for it. That's why that is my favorite movie knife. Because it's not a piece of metal. It's the philosophy that goes with carrying a knife.
Very nice.
Fucking better have 2.
Wow.
I thought you were going to give me
right?
some William Blake or something when you said the philosophy. I was like, oh boy.
No, I'm not that deep. I'm not that smart. I barely graduated high school. I should not have made it through the police. Well, maybe I should have made it through the police academy. They're not all that smart either. But no, it's not that deep of a philosophy. My philosophy is always have backup and be prepared for that other circumstance.
There you go.
I've got 2 guns on me right now.
See, there you go. I do
2
too, and I'm at
knives.
home.
Me too. Yeah, I'm at the shop.
The guys in the shop are tripping out. I'm slowly bringing them around to. I've got a couple of the guys carrying knives correctly now. They've got some. I'm refining a little bit. The guns are getting a little more correct as far as how to carry them and
inside the pocket now.
Inside the waistband, not outside. Yeah, I've got some.
They didn't have them.
I've got 3 guys. I've got a Tuesday and a Thursday afternoon exercise class that I have for anybody that wants to show up. It's at the shop. You can get paid to exercise for 45 minutes.
Wow.
I've got
Nice. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, we didn't even go over the CrossFit shit. Anyways, that's a whole nother rant. I don't have time for it. But so I've got a couple guys that are getting regular at that. I'm trying to get them through. Even Ryan threatens to show up as soon as he gets over his cough. So we'll see. I try. One of the things I've always tried to do in life is always be as much of an asset as I can be wherever I'm at, and I'm still trying to do better at that, and I'm trying to contribute to that. But I'm like, oh, you got 1 gun? That's nice. Now I'll get 2. You got 1 knife? All right, carry it correctly. Now we're gonna get 2. And it's not because I think anybody's gonna be out here gunfighting and knife fighting. I just think you should have backups. You drop one, you drop one in the river. We got a lot of waterways out here. We got a lot of rain. Get slippery, you drop it. You got something else. That's all.
Yeah. Tom is when Tom describes his daily, what he has on his person, he's like the pocket dump guy that I used to make fun of, where it's like, oh, here's my pocket dump picture for today. And it's like a fucking toolbox drawer full of stuff. I'm like, how the fuck do you carry that every day? I know you work in an office.
Yeah, they're not carrying all that stuff.
Right.
I mean, I do, but I carry my backup gun is one of those Smith & Wesson J frames with a shrouded or integral hammer that's titanium and alloy, so it's super light.
Yeah.
It doesn't weigh a lot.
Yeah.
The knives are light and easy, and fixed blades are handy.
Yeah.
They're easy to use when you're wet and cold. You don't have to manipulate a folder, and we make some decent ones, so we're fortunate that way.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, well, my backup is a North American Arms 22 mag.
Yeah, I got one of those.
Got one of those right next to me.
The little pug.
Uh-huh.
See, I don't. That the Pug is the newer one, right? It's a little bit
Yeah.
nicer. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I
that
like
got
the
the
Pug.
foldable handle.
Mine doesn't. It's got stag on it.
But it
Yeah,
probably has closer to real sights on it, right?
It's actually got the 24/7, the big dot.
Oh,
Wow.
that's
No.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
That's jazzy.
I don't have that.
I might have to get one of those.
Tom, you got a question you want to ask?
Shoot, I had some that I wrote. I didn't write them down though. Let's see.
Tom got distracted by the rants.
Sorry,
He was off to the side cheering.
I wasn't planning on that, but they just happened.
Should have pocket dumped some questions.
Favorite Smith and Wesson.
Favorite Smith and Wesson.
Oh boy.
I mean, you kind of got to go with. God, that is tough.
I'm bracing myself for Jade saying, "Well,
Mate,
it's not a Smith and Wesson. It's a
Yeah.
philosophy.
It's
of
a
Smith
it's
and
a
Wesson."
philosophy of Smith and Wesson. So you want a totally shrouded internal hammer, so you don't get any dust or lint in it. No, that's not.
You can go revolver.
You go with the
that's
registered Magnum because that was
Ooh.
an evolutionary leap in handguns and wheel guns back in the day. No, I got it. My favorite Smith & Wesson is an ASP conversion of a Model 59.
Ooh.
All right, Google,
so
Google, get on
that's
that. ASP conversion.
So that's not a revolver though, right?
No, it's an auto.
Yeah.
Wow.
See, you thought
That's
I was
like
going to
a
go revolver. You
DeVille?
want me to go revolver? I can go revolver, but you didn't force me into that
No.
box. So I went outside.
Yeah, that's like a DeVille, right? Did they do
It's
something?
like a DeVille, but for cool guys.
The ASP. Yeah.
Right.
So the
right.
DeVille, the ASP had that gutter snipe sight on top. It was chopped, had the clear windows on the grips and a cutout on the
Yeah.
magazine so you could see your rounds. Alessi made holsters for them. Yeah, they were.
Those were really cool.
That's a unicorn gun though. It's not. Other than
Yeah,
that,
they're like 7
any
or 8
J-frame
grand.
Smith and Wesson revolver, I'm down with.
Same asp as the guys making the batons and stuff, expanding.
Yeah, but they were. I got to ask Jason Burton this because he knows every single detail about this. But
Doesn't Brady
ASP
have one?
I've got one. You think I would
Oh,
name
you've
a
got an
gun I
ASP?
don't have?
Come on, Tom.
Come on, Tom.
So I would, but yeah.
Yeah, Brady's got a couple. I got a DeVille and an ASP. It's just a cool guy gun. It's pretty unique.
Yeah,
It is the same company, but I don't think it's the same. I don't think it's the same people. It's like there was hand changing hands and all that, but it was the late 70s, early 80s. My gun is from 1981
Got it.
because I have the receipt for it, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But that I actually have a couple of the guys in the shop carrying backups for revolvers, which is kind of cool.
That's way cool.
So, tangent. What do you think about the Smith and Wesson, or not the Smith and Wesson, the Sig 365 with the gutter sights? Have you seen those?
Well, I don't think the gutter sight is a good sight. I don't think it was. I have seen that one. Actually, the Smith the Sig one pulls it off way better than that old school ASP one. I don't necessarily think it's a good sight, but I do like that Sig gun with that channel sight.
Yeah,
It's cool enough
AS or something. Or
yeah, it's cool enough. But I mean, my backup carry gun when I was carrying a backup revolver was a 442, so completely internal hammer,
yeah,
airweight aluminum frame, blue steel J-frame 38 special.
very cool.
So, and I still have that gun. That was a cool piece.
Yeah.
Man, how did we get off on that? Well, Tom knew what button to push,
Right?
but I didn't answer the way you thought I was. So there you go.
I
Surprise.
did. You didn't.
Tom threw the bait in the water.
Yeah, I'm not taking that low hanging fruit. Come on.
Good call.
Well, what are you guys going to do now that there's going to be no more podcasts?
My wife will love it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Get some of our lives back.
No, I think you guys do a great job. I think it's necessary. Not necessary to have a guy like me on, but it's necessary to have people on to talk about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And not Leslie. His shit was boring, but talk to a real knife maker. Get somebody on that.
You're gonna make him cry, man.
No, he knows I love him.
Yeah.
I love his old school folders. I still have 3 of them. I love them. They're gorgeous.
I mean, who are we kidding? He's not going to listen to this anyway.
Yeah, he's not.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to listen to this. I'm going to tell my mom about it, and she'll make my sister listen to it. And if my uncle was still around to pay attention, he would listen to it. Outside of that, I don't expect anybody to. But I think it's important that you guys we need to keep going with some of this stuff and get other guys on that can talk about some we don't need to talk about the Bowie from the Alamo, but we need to talk about evolutionary leaps and design changes and things that where some of this stuff comes from and different regions of the country where certain makers aren't even known. Like I can throw out names that nobody knows unless you were in Southern California from 1978 until 1991. You wouldn't know.
Yeah. But
they did change things and make things happen. I think that's cool. So, and I know there's a lot of good makers up in Michigan area. I know, different parts of the country I'm sure there's other people better than me that have better regional stories of things like that. They probably don't have smartphones and computers though. So.
Well, we're trying to pull as much of that stuff as we can. We just recorded an episode that was like a mini history instead of a big giant deep dive, like a whole episode on Loveless that we did, or Skagel, or that kind of stuff, right? Kind of laying the groundwork for people, showing them where the family tree came from for a bunch of stuff. They were other makers that are, important to recognize, important on the timeline, but maybe that there's not a ton of information out there on. And that's the key anymore, right? Yeah. Is some of these stories are going to get lost because a lot of these makers, there was never anything written about them. And the people that know about them are unfortunately disappearing over time, right? So
yeah, I mean, nobody knows an Alex Collins. That I pulled that one out. Nobody would know that one. Very few people would.
Yeah.
And like maybe Vietnam era SOG knives. There was so many Vietnam era knives that nobody. I mean, there's a book about it, but then it still misses a bunch of the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep taking swings at it, man. If you got ideas, fire them off. We'd be love to find some people to have on that could help us talk through some stuff because we want to tell the stories. There's a little bit of durability with the podcast thing because people can go back in the catalog and listen.
Yeah,
we have that a
go
lot.
Back.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'll point a couple people at you that should tell at least some stories of where this came from and that came from. I know there's some guys online that are trying to do like historical dumps about certain topics or certain brands, and I think that's good too.
Yeah.
It's not, when you do the spoken word history, there's always, I mean, if I was drunk, none of this would make any sense. Fortunately, that's not the case. So some of it makes sense, but it's still important to keep some of this stuff going, and maybe it'll inspire somebody to look something up and check a different direction and see what else was.
Exactly. All right. Well, we got to thank you for coming on again. It's been a really cool discussion. We got to thank our friends on Patreon, like we talked about at the beginning of the show. We have a really cool Facebook group that's very interactive and has been really, really cool because we'll do an episode and then folks will start posting, pieces of their own that are relevant to an episode that just happened, stuff like that.
Oh, so nice. I'll post up some stuff in there.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
We got to thank that guy, George Patagonia.
George Pitapata.
Yeah. No, thank you guys. Thanks for having me on. Like I said, I when you guys asked me, I'm like, hell yeah, I'll get on there and talk for 12 minutes. Times 10.
Right.
Yeah, it was really good.
Absolutely.
No, my pleasure. Thank you guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks all.
Thanks everyone.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Crine on the web at crineknives.net, in his Facebook group Crine Knives, or in his Instagram account at Crine Knives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram at birchtreeblades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram, @msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram @markofthemaker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.